Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Had the Quirk Touch Fertility? A special shout out to the original creator, LunaTora. This is the permission statement by the author in written. Please make sure to show your support by checking out their work from the description. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku loved going over to his auntie's house. Kacchan always invited him over for sleepovers since they were little. Auntie Mitsuki also had some of the hottest foods ever. Izuku liked it, but his mom's food was still better. Uncle Masaru was cool too. He made explosions by rubbing his hands together. Kacchan looked a lot like his mom. It was uncanny. But Izuku looked just like his mom, so that must mean girls look like their dads, right? Oi Deku, let's play arm wrestling. Okay. Izuku played and enjoyed the evening with Kacchan. But for some reason his stomach started to hurt. And he felt tired. Izuku, are you alright? I'm fine, just tired. Okay, why don't you go to bed, sweetie? Okay. Izuku laid down on Kacchan's bed. His stomach kept aching and wouldn't go away. Bakugo walked into his room and watched Izuku sleep. He felt compelled to get into his bed, but he was told not to by his mom. Apparently, if one person got sick, it was easier for another to get sick as well. He heard Izuku whimper. Curiously, he looks over at Izuku. He reaches out only for Izuku to sit up holding his stomach. There in the center was a slight bulge. Bakugo did not scream. Masaru had never moved as fast as he did then. Katsuki had run out of his room screaming. He kept saying Izuku was inflated but wasn't making any sense. He ran into the room to see a bulge to Izuku's stomach. Izuku had tears streaming down his face. Masaru picked him up and raced him down to the car. Mitsuki was on her cell calling Inko and letting her know to meet them at the hospital. Mitsuki took the back with Katsuki to keep Izuku comfortable. Mitsuki watched as the doctors took Izuku into emergency surgery. Apparently something had grown inside of Izuku in the last 4 hours. One doctor mentioned that it could be his quirk appearing, but were not certain. She hugged Katsuki close to her chest. She was terrified. What could have happened? The sound of quick feet caught her attention as Masaru caught Inko, who was drowning in tears, asking about her son. It was painful to watch. Inko paced the waiting room as they waited for news about Izuku. Oh, she was so worried. What had happened to her baby boy? Was he poisoned? Had they found cancer? Oh, why couldn't they let her know already? It was 5:45 in the morning when a doctor came by to inform them about what had happened. Inko collapsed into Mitsuki's arms as she was given a horrible truth. Izuku's quirk had come in and it was the cause of his pain. Inko sat next to her baby's bed. Izuku was covered head to toe in fabric to prevent another incident. Inko looked over to the window where Katsuki was standing. He took the news extremely hard. Who wouldn't? Izuku had just gotten pregnant, partially developed a baby and lost the baby. All in the span of 4 hours. Inko brushed a hand through his hair. The doctors said that brushing touches were okay, but a full hold for longer than a few seconds could leave enough DNA to jumpstart his quirk. It didn't look like it was triggered by family blood, which meant Inko could still touch her son, but that meant Mitsuki, Masaru, and Katsuki couldn't. Mitsuki was talking with Masaru about how to handle Katsuki with this revelation. Inko was just glad her son had survived. This was a dangerous quirk to have to both him and those around him. It was going to be classified as a self-biohazard quirk. Those kinds of quirks were rare, but they did happen. In most cases it was because they spilled out radiation or some kind of fluid that was unsanitary. But no, her baby had to have a most horrendous one. The doctors had told her that he would have to go through some testing before being allowed to go home. It was something she didn't want. But what could you do? She looked over at Izuku as he moaned in pain. Izuku slowly opened his eyes to see bright fluorescent lights. He turned his head and saw his mom in a chair next to him. What happened? His mom's eyes welled up with tears. Oh, Izuku. She hugged him while crying. It confused him. What was wrong? Was he dying? What, is there something wrong with him? You're awake? Everyone in the room turned to look at the voice. The doctor then smiled at them. He was part octopus. He sat down in a chair not far from them. How do you feel, Izuku? Izuku thought about this. He felt a dull pain in his abdomen, but other than that he felt fine. The doctor nodded. That would seem right. What do you mean? You see, Izuku, your quirk came in. Izuku smiled. That mean? Sadly, it is classified as a biohazard to yourself and others. Izuku froze. Did he kill someone? Look, there is no easy way to say this, but your quirk is a touch-based quirk that takes DNA from another person and combines it with your own to produce a child. From what we could gather, you had absorbed enough DNA from your friend to jumpstart the process, but it wasn't enough for a viable living child. Sadly, the child died. Izuku felt himself freeze. He and Kacchan? Oh no. Izuku bent over and started to sob. Inko hugged her baby, tried to. Izuku gasped and launched himself away from his mom. Don't touch me. The adults in the room felt their hearts shatter. Bakugo looked up at his friend for the first time ever. He growled, climbing the bed and placing himself between Izuku and the adults. Don't touch him or I kill you. Mitsuki gasped and grabbed his arm. The doctor frowned at the boy but ignored him to talk to Inko. Now, since it is a biohazard, we have to run some tests to see the extent of his quirk, and please do not fret, we will only do what you allow us to do. Inko looked over at Izuku. Izuku has his hands placed on his head. His tiny child brain struggled to make sense of what was going on. Inko steeled herself. Okay, but I have one request. Yes? I choose how we handle this with the schools. I understand. With that, the doctor left. Inko looked over at the Bakugos and Izuku. She steeled herself more. This was all for Izuku's well-being. Izuku groaned loudly from the top of his middle school rooftop. Kacchan was off to the side not too far from him. What is it now, nerd? I just realized that you have to stay after school today because of the fight this morning. And that means I have to walk home alone in the long way. Kacchan perked up at this. Are you scared or something? Izuku whirled around. Me scared? Ha. Nope, just worried you'd have a stroke worrying about me. Izuku teased. Katsuki shot up. Of course I'd worry. Have you forgotten what? Never mind. Izuku stilled, causing Katsuki to stop. Izuku sighed and sat down next to him to finish their lunch. It had been 11 years since Izuku's quirk came in. It had been 10 since his last experimentation. All these years Izuku and his schools had been lying through their teeth at the students. Only a select few knew about Izuku's true quirk. Everyone else was told he was quirkless. Not that Izuku minded or anything, since he had a bodyguard, so to speak. See, ever since the incident with the half-formed fetus, Kacchan had taken it upon himself to make sure no one touched Izuku. At first people found it cute, but as time wore on it became a little bit of a problem. It was especially a problem due to the fact that Kacchan had an amazing quirk, explosion. It was clear to them that someone with a heroic quirk shouldn't hang out with a quirkless loser. Not that they really cared, it just seemed to lead Kacchan to a lot of fights. Izuku felt a tap on his shoulder. Lunch is over, nerd. Let's go, right? Izuku felt like dying or passing out. Whichever came first. Currently he's sitting on the ground as two heroes scold him for running in to help Kacchan. It was all his fault. He had been walking home from school when he was attacked by a sludge man. He was then rescued by his all-time favorite hero, All Might, only to do something stupid and end up on a roof with him, finding out a well-kept secret and having his dream of being the first quirkless hero ever crushed, only to then have to walk by a villain attack where Kacchan had been taken hostage by the same sludge villain. What a wonderful Friday afternoon. He was about to pass by a street intersection when All Might appeared in front of him. All Might, what are you doing here? Young man, I came to find you. You see, you inspired me to act back there when no one else would move to help the young man. But you, a quirkless boy, jumped right in to help him. That is why you, my boy, can be a hero. Izuku felt his face split into a grin. It widened to an almost impossible size. What All Might aid next, however, flipped everything on its head. That is why I have chosen you to inherit my quirk. What? And you just agreed? Shh, not so loud. Izuku was lying down under Kacchan's bunk. Since they turned 6, Kacchan has been staying over at his house or vice versa. It happens so often their parents just bought bunk beds to make it easier on everyone. Currently Kacchan was staying over because Izuku was attacked first, not because he was worried Izuku would pop out a slime baby. Izuku had told Kacchan about One for All and he was scolding him for just agreeing. He didn't care that it was from All Might. Do you even know if it has any side effects? No, I didn't think to ask. Besides, I'd first have to train to inherit the power of All Might. Kacchan huffed. Izuku sighed. Look, I know you're worried, but I need a good quirk to become a hero. All Might is offering me one on a silver platter, can't you just be happy? No. With that, Kacchan jumped down. I won't be happy until I know 100% that you won't get hurt with all this. Kacchan, it's not like I'm 3 anymore. Kacchan started at Izuku before growling. Fine, do whatever, but I'm watching you from a distance to make sure you don't do something stupid. Izuku smiled. No promises. It had been 5 months since young Midoriya started training to inherit One for All. In that time, Toshinori has noticed a few troubling signs. For one, young Midoriya always wore long sleeves and gloves. Even when it was an exceedingly hot day, young Midoriya was adamant about keeping his shirt and gloves on. It made Toshinori worry to the point he was constantly giving him Gatorade and water to keep him from dehydrating. The second thing he noticed almost immediately was that young Midoriya had a stalker. It was a young boy around his age. Spiky blonde hair, vibrant red eyes, a snarl on his face whenever young Midoriya was with him. He thought the first day he saw it that it was just a coincidence, but when he was there the next day, just a few minutes before young Midoriya had arrived, Toshinori knew. This young man was stalking his successor. Toshinori felt even more put on edge when this young man seemed to be able to tell when young Midoriya changed his schedule. He was always there, always watching. Which leads him to the last troubling thing that he found. Young Midoriya is very adverse to human touch. The first time it happened, Toshinori lifted his hand to pat young Midoriya's head. He had barely landed his hand on young Midoriya when the boy launched himself to the floor and about a foot away. He held a hand to his chest and seemed to be close to a panic attack. Since then he's noticed that young Midoriya always keeps an eye out for people's hands and bodies, almost as if he expects an attack. So, with all his expertise, he has put together a theory as to what has happened to young Midoriya. Young Midoriya, come over here for a moment, please. Young Midoriya placed the microwave down and walked over to the bench where Toshinori was sitting. Young Midoriya wiped some sweat off his forehead. He smiled up at Toshinori. What's up? Young Midoriya asked, drinking from his water. Toshinori took a deep breath. Young Midoriya, are you being abused at home? Izuku did a spit take. Did it All Might just? I don't wish to alarm you, but you show some very concerning behaviors. For example, avoiding and touching people's hands. I mean I am a little adverse to touch, but abuse? All Might took on a more serious look. Yes, the behavior lines up perfectly with what abuse victims normally display. As well as your strange dress manner. I just prefer to cover up. Really, it's nothing like that. My mom is as sweet as a button. She wouldn't dash. Young Midoriya. Izuku froze like a deep in headlights. All Might had always spoken softly to him. He'd never raised his voice. Right now All Might was shaking. His fist was clenched tightly. You could almost hear his teeth grinding. Please, do not lie to me, young Midoriya. It was soft, almost whisper-like. Please, I beg of you, don't lie to me if you're in pain. Izuku looked down at his shoes. It seemed like a twisted version of fate. Just that morning Katsuki warned Izuku of this for the 100th time. When are you gonna tell him? Tell who what? Don't play dumb nerd. You know who I'm talking about? Izuku sighed. I'll tell him when I'm ready to tell him. Besides, I don't think All Might would allow for someone with a quirk as dangerous as mine to have his quirk. So you're just going to lie to him until he hands it over? No. I'll tell him when the time is right, before the rest of the 10 months are up. Kacchan got up and grabbed his backpack. Look, you better tell him before he starts to speculate things. At the rate you're going, he's going to make you out as some abuse or trauma victim. All Might would never just assume. He wouldn't if you weren't so secretive about your quirk. You know why I am? I know. Kacchan stopped at the door. I just want you to tell him before you get hurt. With that, Kacchan left to get to his hiding spot first. Izuku sighed, grabbing his backpack. Kacchan is crazy, that would never happen. Izuku took a deep breath. Looks like Kacchan was right. Izuku looked up at All Might. All Might, I'm going to be honest with you. This made All Might smile. If only Izuku wasn't about to shatter his smile. I haven't been 100% honest with you. You see? It's okay, my boy, take your time. Izuku gulped. Just let it out. It's like ripping a bandai. I lied about not having a quirk. Time slowed down. All Might seemed to just tilt his head to one side. Izuku felt tears well up in his eyes. I have a quirk, but I hate it. This concerned All Might. Hating one's quirk was never a good thing, especially if it leads someone to lie about their quirk status. My boy, what is your quirk? Izuku took a deep breath. My quirk is called Touch Fertility. All Might let the silence stretch. It wouldn't do either of them any good if he pushed the issue. Izuku wiped his eyes. My quirk, it basically forces me to become a parent. It forcibly takes DNA from anyone that touches me for prolonged periods of time and forces a baby to be made and dash. All Might places a hand on Izuku's shoulder. It startles Izuku to where he jumps, trying to put distance between them. But All Might holds steady. Young Midoriya, please take deep breaths. Izuku follows his instructions and calms himself. He then gulped down half his water bottle. All Might sat there processing what he was just told. Izuku was almost certain that he was going to choose another successor. Well, I guess that explains most of your habits, but it does leave one string loose. Izuku looked at All Might. Who is your stalker? Stalker? The boy with the blonde hair and red eyes. Izuku blinked. Then he snorted and now he was rolling on the ground laughing. Young Midoriya? Izuku between breaths sent a quick message on his phone before answering. Teach, that was Kachin. Kachin? A loud explosion was heard from not even 2 feet away, followed by an extremely loud voice. Who the hell is he calling a stalker? That Skeleton Jack ripoff? Toshinori held his head as the two teens finished explaining Izuku's quirk in detail. And that's about everything we could gather in that 1 year. Young Midoriya ended. Took the damn doctors long enough to let him go. Young Bakugo added. Toshinori sighed. Let me see if I have the facts. One young Midoriya's quirk is a touch-based quirk that forcefully pulls the touch's DNA towards him to create a breathing living child. Correct. How does that work? Basically, it's like you touching a glass cup. You will notice an imprint of your fingers on the cup. This is the stray DNA that is left by the human body when it touches someone. And after 10 seconds it starts to pull from cells deeper in the body. Yeah, they said it was something to do with important chromosomes not found in skin cells. So, young Midoriya has the female reproductive system? What, no? I only have the uterus. It's placed somewhere above my rectum and bladder. Does this mean you can give birth naturally? Nah, Nerd's body doesn't seem to be suitable for anything other than carrying the damn brats, so he has to have C-sections. Why didn't you get a support item to help you with your quirk? We tried to get one, but the Heroes Commission said that even as a biohazard quirk it wasn't dangerous or unpredictable enough for them to issue me a support item. We also looked at how much it would have cost, and there was no way we could pay for such an item. Toshinori nodded along with the answers. He understood now what the issue that plagued young Midoriya was, but only one thing didn't add up for him. And where did young Bakugo come in this whole situation? Bakugo glared at Toshinori. I'm the one who was first affected other than Izuku. Toshinori took a few seconds to realize what that meant. Is young Midoriya a father? No. Bakugo jumped up from the floor. Wait, Kachin. Shut up, nerd. Bakugo yelled. No, he isn't, because our dash. Bakugo stopped and looked at the floor. The baby didn't have enough DNA to form completely, so it died. Toshinori grimaced at the statement. Bakugo turned around and started to walk away. Since he knows I don't have to stand guard anymore. Just make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. I'm going home. Young Midoriya looked like he wanted to say something but refused to call out to young Bakugo. He sighed, catching young Midoriya's attention. Now that I know about this, I have to warn you about something. Young Midoriya sat up straight and nodded his head. One for All has a slight enhancement property that makes a wielder's quirk become stronger than it was before. Because of this, I wish to ask you if you are still comfortable with accepting this quirk. You mean to tell me that even after I lied about my quirk, you still want to give me One for All? Toshinori chuckled. Of course. I choose you based on your heart, not your quirk. But I will say that changing your quirk registration may be a bit difficult. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Well, That is a bridge we will have to cross later. For now I need to know if dash. Of course I still wish to inherit your power. It's much better at heroics than my own and it would make my life much easier. Not to mention the dash. Oi nerd, quit mumbling. Both of them jumped, turning to look at the voice. Bakugo was holding 3 cups with ice cream inside. He had a small blush on his face. My mom saw me and decided to shove ice cream into my hands to bring over. At this Izuku started laughing. Okachan. Such a good boy. Toshinori laughed as Bakugo chased Izuku around. Maybe these next few months will be more entertaining. Izuku screamed. He'd done it. He'd really done it. He'd cleaned the entire beach. He toppled over the edge of the pile. He felt All Might catch him and set him down on his feet. He smiled up at All Might. I did it. I really did it. Yes, you did, young Midoriya. Not only did you finish, but you exceeded my expectations. Izuku laughed while crying a little. It was too good to be true, but here he stood. And now for your reward, right? I forgot what All Might said before giving Izuku the hair. Eat this. That was not what he was expecting. He still ate it but was completely weirded out by it. So, I don't feel any different? It takes about an hour or so before it comes in. Give a chance to digest. After a few moments with All Might, Izuku went back home and showered before getting onto his train. He was reading on his phone when someone decided to be a freaking quirkiest bastard. What's a villain like you doing trying out for UA? Oh, someone's going to die today. Izuku looked around and spotted 3 teens harassing another one. The boy they were harassing had gravity-defying hair and dark eye bags under his purple eyes. Izuku felt his anger boil as one of them pushed the boy on his shoulder. Without thinking, Izuku launched himself between the boys. Dude, I don't know you were trying out for UA, why didn't you tell me? Izuku yelled loudly. The boys behind him sputtered and jumped back while the purplet blinked in surprise. One of the boys behind him started to speak. Oi Tiny, you know this villain? Izuku turned his head slightly, sending a sneaky wink to the purplet. Of course we meet up every other week at a cat cafe. Why do you know him? Yeah, he's the villain from our school. The shortest of the 3 boys squeaked. Oh, has he stolen something? The boys looked at each other. No. Has he hurt someone? No. Does he have a criminal record? No. He has a villain quirk. The last boy yelled. Izuku stood up straight. So you're admitting to harassment and bullying another student due to his quirk? Before any of the boys could talk, Izuku continued his little rant. That is quirk discrimination. It is a federal law that is punishable by 5 to 25 years in prison if found guilty. On top of that, most actual villains, around 97%, are created when bigots, like you 3, decide that they are villains and decide to make their lives hell for something they can't control. Besides, a quirk is a biological tool that is meant to help up or improve our survival, not a determining factor in which our lives will be decided. Furthermore, a hand landed on his shoulder, causing him to jump. He turned to see a man with short black hair. He had a glare on his face. Don't worry, kid, I'll take it from here. Why, yeah, what are you gonna do about it? One of the boys yelled. The man reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it and showed them. Oh shit. It was a detective. The 3 boys paled at this and tried to talk their way around the problem, but the detective held his hand up. I saw everything that happened, so there is no use in lying to me. He turned to Izuku and the purplet. Do you 2 mind staying here while I take these 2 to the front of the train? Izuku shook his head. With that, the man led all the boys away. Izuku released a breath he was holding. Thanks. Izuku did not jump nor scream when he heard the purplet talk. The teen started at him like he had grown a second head. You okay? Izuku waved his hand at the teen. Yeah, you just startled me. Izuku took a seat next to the boy. Izuku stretched his hands above his head. The between kept staring at Izuku. Izuku looked around before pointing at himself. Are you looking at me? In all honesty, it was a simple question. One Shinso should have been able to answer, but something kept his mouth shut for a few moments longer. The greenette looked at him with big doe eyes. Shinso could almost swear that they were the most innocent eyes he'd ever seen. Which is why he almost hit himself when he opened his mouth. Why would you stand up for a villain? Almost immediately a small finger booped his nose. Shinso recoiled at the soft touch, as did the greenette. Suddenly the boy stood and started to bow repeatedly and quickly. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I can't believe that please don't be mad. I just felt very comfortable with you and I didn't respect boundaries and dash. It's okay." They both stopped and stared at each other. The boy smiled softly before sitting down again. "Sorry, it's just that when I hear things like that I get kind of mad. You know?" It was then that Shinso noticed that the boy was wearing dark green wool mittens. Shinso looked up at the boy. His curiosity must have shown because the boy held up his right hand. I have a biohazardous quirk. It prevents me from having skin-to-skin contact with anyone that isn't family. That must suck." And now Shinso wanted to kill his dad for his nonchalant attitude rubbing off on him. Well, there goes the only friend he's ever had. The boy giggled, causing heat to rise up Shinso's neck and face. "I don't really know. I have one friend who is more like a rabid guard dog, so I didn't suffer too much. Anyways, what's your quirk?" Shinso felt a little apprehension to tell the boy his quirk, but maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't judge him. "Brainwash. I control a person who responds to me." Shinso braced himself for the inevitable. "That's so cool. It's like the most perfect quirk for a hero." Shinso almost jumped at the loudness from the boy beside him. The boy pulled out a notebook. "Does it only work with full-voiced responses, or do grunts work as well? How many people can you brainwash at one time? How long does it last? Can someone get out of it on their own?" Mutter, mutter. Shinso looked so confused but at the same time shocked. This little green bean actually said it was perfect for heroics. Shinso didn't know what came over him at that moment, but he grabbed the boy's shoulder and turned him to look at him. The boy was confused and scared. "What? The boy tilted his head. "Izuku Midoriya. Hitoshi Shinso. Please, give me your number." Izuku nodded, grabbing Shinso's now open phone. He input his number and looked up at Shinso. "Is everything okay?" Izuku asked timidly. "Yes. I just wanted the name and number of my first believer." Izuku giggled at the statement. "You don't know you could have asked like a normal person?" Shinso felt a blush rush up his face. Shut up." Izuku laughed, pulling a few chuckles from him. Detective Tsukachi smiled as he sent the video over to Shinso's parents. It was nice to see the boy trying to make friends. He just wishes he had more of the loud one's social skills than the walking zombie. He chuckled as said zombie started to send death threats about the green bean. The other was gushing over a potential boyfriend, which only egged the other one on. He smiled at himself. This was going to be an interesting year. He would live to regret those words. Shinso chuckled more at Izuku's story about how Kachin almost made a boy crap his pants for trying to get Izuku to touch him. Shinso had shared some horror stories with Izuku about being different. He was glad to see not everyone was a piece of crap like his dad said. "Who the fuck are you?" Shinso heard the explosions before he saw the boy. The blonde bodyguard that was called Kachin. Shinso watched as Izuku grabbed Kachin's shirt to keep him from Shinso. "Kachin, this is my new friend Toshikin." "Toshikin, this is Kachin." Kachin froze before whirling around on Izuku. "What did you call him, nerd?" "Toshikin? Why the hell does he get a chan so fast?" "Because he was discriminated against for his quirk?" Kachin stopped before leveling a glare at him. "Quirk now? Brainwashing." Kachin mulled this over before sighing. "Bullied?" Shinso nodded. Kachin groaned, sticking a hand out. "Katsuki Bakugo. Don't call me Kachin. I'm gonna be the #1 hero and protect people like the damn nerds, so get used to living in my shadow eye bags." "Hitoshi Shinso. Don't call me Toshikin. I'm gonna be the best underground hero and prove that my quirk isn't villainous." Katsuki looked him up and down before donning a feral smile. "I can live with him. Let's go. The exam should be starting soon." Katsuki grabbed the back of Izuku's hoodie and dragged him along. "What?" Kachin slowed down. "Nope." Shinso chuckled following the two as they walked along. Izuku kept scolding Katsuki for dragging him and Katsuki just ignored him. "Say eyebags, how'd you meet Izuku? He stopped some bullies." Katsuki stopped. Shinso saw the blonde's hands twitch before he whirled around. "Where the hell are they?" Shinso recoiled a little. That was, well, an explosive reaction. Izuku sighed before karate chopping Katsuki's head. "Kachin, a detective on the train, took care of the issue. Now let's go before we really are late. They stopped in front of the gate to UA. Both Izuku and Shinso gaped at the tall building. So cool. I know. Okay, stop drooling over the damn gate and let's go. Katsuki grabbed both of them and dragged their buttons inside. They were still 30 minutes early and had time to go find a seat. Katsuki wanted to be in the very front while Shinso said they should be in the very back. Up close we can get all the information we want loud and clear. It's better to gather intel from the back in the shadows where no one can see us. Or we can sit in the middle and put this dumb argument to rest. Both boys looked at Izuku as he walked off to find a chair in the middle of the auditorium. Katsuki grumbled while Shinso shrugged and followed their friend. Izuku set his book bag down. I'm gonna head to the bathroom very quickly. Watch my stuff for me. I'll go dash. I think he can use the bathroom by himself. Katsuki leveled a glare at Shinso. I know that. Then let him go. Don't worry, we'll watch your stuff, just hurry back, okay? Izuku nodded, taking off to ask a teacher where the bathrooms were. Katsuki sat down growling. Shinso sat in the seat next to Izuku's. Ectoplasm came around and handed them a note card. They thanked him. They sat in silence for a few moments. The damn nerd is a trouble magnet. Shinso looked over at Katsuki. He always wants to help everybody and gets into unnecessary issues. It's why I try and stay close by. To keep him from biting off more than he can chew. But isn't that what a hero does? Step in and help others when they need it? Shinso replied, I get where you're coming from, but it doesn't seem to stop him. Wouldn't it be better to just go along with him? Not if it gets us both killed. They sat in silence for a few moments. It's taken him a while to use the restroom. Yeah, it has. Should we check on him? Maybe. Both stood to go look for Izuku when said boy ran in, dragging another boy behind him. He ran up to them and stopped, panting. Sorry I took a while, but Nidakan needed help. They looked over at the other blonde who had a busted lip. Then they looked over at Izuku who had a bruised cheek. Katsuki and Shinso both saw red. What the hell happened? Oh, we may have had a confrontation? Flashback. Izuku walked up to an ectoplasm clone. Excuse me, can you point me towards the bathrooms? Of course, just down the hall to your right. First door on your left. Okay, thank you. Izuku walked the entire way to the bathroom. It wouldn't be a good idea if... Izuku crashed into someone. The person in front of him fell back. Izuku looked down at the blonde-haired boy. Oh my god, I'm so sorry I didn't dash. Don't worry about it. The boy grumbled. Izuku blinked. You okay? The boy looked up. He scoffed. Yeah, I'm fine. Izuku noticed the boy was a little ruffled and had a bleeding lip. Izuku looked up and noticed some teens looking around down the hall. Izuku grabbed the boy by his sleeve and yanked him into a room. Izuku slammed the door shut. What the hell? I had to get you out of the line of fire. But did those guys dash? The blonde blushed. Oh, it's just dash. Oh, there you are. Both boys jumped to see the three taller teens standing at the door. They were smiling. Hey, how's your face, kid? It's fine. Really, because that was a nasty hit you gave yourself? Izuku looked between both of them. I feel like I'm missing something in this whole exchange. You're not Dash. Nito here can copy anyone's quirk as long as it is not a mutation. Izuku whirled around to the blonde, now identified as Nito. Really? That's so cool. Can you copy multiple quirks at once? Is there a time limit? Is Dash G's kid talk any faster and we would have thought you had a lung-based quirk? The guys laughed before going to rub Izuku's head. Izuku flinched and ducked around it. The teens looked at each other before looking at Izuku. What's wrong with you? And nothing. I just don't like people touching me is all. The boys suddenly took a slightly darker look. Oh, afraid of a little touch? And no, it's just Dash. One of the boys on the right grabbed Izuku's arm and yanked him forward. Before they could attack him, the door behind them slammed open. What is the meaning of this? Izuku tripped on his own 2 feet and slammed into the corner of a desk before landing face down on the floor. It was silent. Young man, are you okay? Izuku lifted his head. I believe these 3 to be bullies, sir. The ectoplasm clone looked at the 3 older boys. He huffed before motioning for Izuku and Nito to leave. Go on. I'll handle these 3. Izuku shot up and grabbed Nito's arm. Thank you, sir. He yelled before speeding off. And then I ran here dragging Nidakan behind me. Shinso shook his head. Katsuki was glaring at Izuku and him while he did first aid on both boys. He is a magnet for trouble. I'm not. Yes, you are. Toshikan, tell Kachin to stop messing with me. It's the truth though. Izuku signed, setting his head on the table in front of him. He looked over at Nito. He was about to ask for his number, but as if by some cosmic god they announced they would be having the written portion of the exam soon and for everyone to sit down. Well, good you guys. All three boys hummed in response to Izuku. Hey, I have an idea. How about after the exam we meet up somewhere, all four of us? They had let the examinees out for lunch before the practical exam. Izuku, Katsuki, Shinso and Nito, who was dragged against his will, sat at a table together munching on their lunches. Why should we? Nito mumbled. Well, if we all get into the heroes course it would be beneficial to start making connections with other heroes, even if it is in our own grade level. Izuku replied, taking a bite of his lunch. To add to what the nerd is saying, if one of yous fails it may give them an edge. How? Shinso questioned. It's not like a student can recommend another student. You're right, Toshikan, we can, but that doesn't mean we can't share the information we learn in Heroes course with the students wishing to enter. But they do have a limited amount of space for the hero course though. Nito added, silently cursing himself for the somewhat friendly environment getting to him. Right? So say we go along with your plan to meet up. Where would we meet up? That's easy, Toshikan. We'll meet up at the Perfectly Catatonic Cafe. Izuku, I'm not going dash. Yes. The three boys looked at Shinso, who had a blush on his face. Nito chuckled. A fan much? No, I've never been. Parents are too busy to go with me and I never had the courage to go alone. That's okay, Toshikan. We can go as a group. We can meet up at the train station and walk there together. Wait up. I never agreed to this. Nito exclaimed. You did the moment you allowed the damn nerd to drag you around. That signifies nothing, you aggressive Pomeranian. What the hell did you call me extra? Izuku sighed as the two blondes argued with each other. He felt a tap on his shoulder. Izuku, what exactly is your quirk? Izuku froze. He hadn't expected the question so soon. He looked over at Kachin, but Nidakan blocked his path. Yeah, what is your quirk? Izuku looked between the two boys. He didn't have a way or telling them without, no, this will work. I'll tell you at the Cat Cafe. What? You heard me. I don't feel comfortable with multiple people knowing it, so I want a private meeting. That's the only way you're going to find out. Shinso looked at Katsuki. Katsuki shrugged. His quirk, his rules. Nito looked torn between wanting to deny and wanting to accept. He groaned before fishing his phone out. Put your number in. And your quirk better be worth the embarrassment of walking into one of those cat cafes. Izuku smiled while taking the phone. Oh, trust me, it is. A bell rang signifying the end of lunch. Izuku followed Katsuki as they were given cards indicating where they were to sit. Now on to the actual practical exam. After said exam, Izuku felt like crying. He hadn't gotten a single point. Not one. He was walking home with Kachin, who had waited up for him. He saw Shinso at the gate and saw the same dejected look on his face. Guess he had a potential classmate. They offered to walk to the train station together, but Shinso said he was waiting on his ride. Izuku and Kachin respected that and wished him well until they met up again. Don't worry, Kachin said, placing an arm around Izuku. If you don't make it in, you can always take the Gen Ed exam and move over during the sports festival. Izuku nodded but kept quiet. It hurt to think that all his training was for naught. The only good thing during the exam was that he saved that one girl from being crushed. So it couldn't all be bad, right? Toshinori sighed as he stretched. It was the week after the results had made it home to many of the students. He had met young Midoriya and young Bakugo the night of the results and had gotten Izuku to agree to bring his mom to the school today. Toshinori was dreading the reactions of everyone. He especially didn't want Izuku to feel like he had to hide his quirk. While it does seem like a cue, at times it can be useful, right? Besides, it's not like they could kick him out because of his Biohazardes quirk. He was pacing in front of the school. He had 2 visitor badges ready for Izuku and his mom. He wasn't sure how well Ms. Midoriya was going to take this news. All might. Toshinori smiled as Izuku walked up to the school with his mom in tow. She held herself very anxiously. She bowed to him while Izuku smiled. So what are we doing here today? Well, Ms. Midoriya, we are talking to Principal Nizu and Recovery Girl about Izuku's quirk. Ms. Midoriya seemed to tremble at his words. Izuku laid a hand on her shoulder, comforting her. Don't worry. Here at UA we ensure the best for our students. Tashinori nodded before bringing both mother and son up to the principal's office. He felt his heart pound in his chest as they made their way up. Nizu didn't like when things were hidden from him. He liked all variables to be placed out in front of him. It ensured that everything went smoothly. He looked at Izuku Midoriya's sheet again. His quirk was labeled a biohazard at age 3. No help by the Heroes Commission was ever given due to it being touch-activated. No support items were ever bought, which explains the teachers and staff lying about his quirk. All this at the order of Ms. Midoriya. It's not like she didn't try, but she was blinded by what she could have done. Nizu found it surprising as well that Tashinori gave Izuku one for all when he knew what could happen. It didn't add up in Nizu's mind, which is why he agreed to this meeting with Recovery Girl present. He watched as the group got closer to the office. Nizu set everything up nicely. 5 cups of tea, some biscuits, and a layout that let Izuku be at the center of both his mom and All Might while facing Nizu. Nizu smiled, pushing a button to open the doors. Inko jumped as the doors swung open. Mr. Yagi sighed and motioned for the group to enter. She sat down on Izuku's right while Mr. Yagi sat on the left. Nizu was seated in front of Izuku while Recovery Girl was on his left. Tea, anyone? Yes, please. Inko grabbed the cup and took a sip. She looked up in surprise. This is rose tea with a mix of chamomile, honey, and lemon. Its best use is for calming down nerves. Nizu perked up at this. Ah, I see you enjoy tea. Enjoy is an understatement, Principal Nizu. My grandmother taught me the importance of a good cup of tea. It is not some simple etiquette. Nizu smiled brightly at this. You have a good grasp on the etiquette of tea, Ms. Midoriya. Now on to something that has puzzled me about your son. His quirk. Inko sat up straight. Nizu continued. I see you have had teachers keep his quirk a secret and allowed for them to go tell classes that he is quirkless, yes? Yes, that is true. May I ask why? You see, there is no way for us to afford a support item to help him deal with his quirk. It was decided that to keep it a secret was the better choice, as we didn't want prosecution for narrow-minded parents or over-curious children. Yes, I also understand the quirkless statistics, and it was something both my son and I discussed multiple times as he got older if he wished to keep the quirkless secret. Nizu nodded. I see. Are you also aware that your son's quirk has mutated? Yes, he informed me, and we went to a recommended specialist who told us he now pulled in energy from the area around him and converted it to a focused mega blast. He does still take others' DNA for the primary part of his quirk, but as long as he has no skin-to-skin contact with anyone, he will be fine. You understand that we can't have our teachers lie about a student's quirk, correct? Yes, I understand. The only thing I wish is that you would allow for Izuku to disclose what his quirk is to his teachers at his own pace. Nizu thought about it. It was risky, but it made sense. He nodded. Very well. We shall allow it. Now Recovery Girl will ask a few questions and then you are free to leave. Izuku waved back to All Might as his mom and him walked to the train station. He felt good about this. He would wait a few days, then tell his teachers his quirk. What could go wrong? Okay, Izuku, you sure Katsuki and the others are waiting at the cafe for you? Yes, I'm certain they are, Mom. Now go home and relax. Text me when you get there and when you're coming home. Okay, Mom. You have what you need? I do, Pops. Shinso looked up from where he was tying his shoes. Hisashi Yamada was standing over him, fretting. We could drive you there? Pops, I'm fine. It's just a quick get-together. Beside, we can zashi. Nizu just texted about a meeting. It concerns one of the new students. Shinso looked around to see his other dad, Shodaizawa. See, I'll be fine. All right, just who are you meeting again? Katsuki Bakugo, Nito Monoma, and Izuku Midoriya? Aizawa narrowed his eyes as Shinso closed the door. He didn't know it yet, but he wouldn't trust Izuku. Something about him seemed wrong. Come on, you grumpy cat, we can't be late for Nizu's meeting. Aizawa sighed, leaving behind his husband. Tashinori pulled at his sleeve. He was nervous, and considering what was about to happen, it was understandable. He was about to have Nizu not only explain young Midoriya's quirk vaguely but also explain that he personally knew the boy. While this would seem like favoritism, which it was, don't lie Toshinori, it would be played off as something else. He watched as his fellow heroes, and soon co-teachers, entered the room. He wasn't worried about most of the teachers, who were obvious fans. No, his worry lied with 3 teachers: Aizawa, Vlad King and Midnight. The 3 underground, for the most part, teachers. Underground heroes for the most part were always suspicious of people, especially when there is a lack of information. He was also concerned about the blatant lies that are spread with biohazardous quirks. So, he has made it his mission to put that to rest before working out a plan with Aizawa on how to work with young Midoriya's sudden mutation. As the last person came in and sat down, Toshinori straightened up. This was it. This was the deciding factor in young Midoriya's UA school career. Hello everyone, I hope you are all well. Many grumbled out replies while others stayed silent. Now that pleasantries are out of the way, we can focus on the main topic. Toshinori nodded his approval at Nizu's approach. Izuku's quirk wasn't an issue or a problem that needed fixing. It was something that the school had to accommodate. You mean the student? Cementos asked. Precisely. The student in question is young Izuku Midoriya. Toshinori noticed Aizawa and Yamada exchange a glance at each other. File that away for further investigation. What is the problem with the student? Aizawa questioned. Yes, if it is enough to warrant a meeting, it can't be anything but a problem. Vlad followed up. Unless we miss something in his records that is troubling, I doubt it can be anything but an issue. Midnight doubled down. There was the famous underground probing. Nizu looked at Toshinori. All the teachers looked at him. He cleared his throat. About 10 months ago I ran into young Midoriya. Many teachers leaned in to hear. A student recognized by all might was no laughing matter. He was at Takoba Municipal Beach with another student training for the UA entrance exam when his quirk suddenly mutated. I was able to help young Midoriya by getting him the proper medical treatment. However, I was not aware that his quirk had been labeled biohazardous. Many teachers gasped. Biohazardous quirks were rare and far in between. So to have a student have one was a truly troubling notion. Aizawa and Hizashi felt their hearts stop. Shinso was currently interacting with Izuku Midoriya as they spoke. It was at this point Vlad decided to interject. How is that possible? I mean, with no offense, but we all saw what his quirk could do. How was that a biohazard? Toshinori smiled. That was the mutation. His original quirk worked solely by skin-to-skin contact and affected only the people touching. The mutation allowed for young Midoriya to absorb heat and physical energy from the surrounding environment and expel it in a singular attack. Many teachers started mumbling amongst themselves. Hound Dog growled before glaring at Nizu. Does this mean we essentially have a student with no experience regarding his mutation? Essentially, yes. The teachers all quieted down. Toshinori could already see many of them were not liking the prospect of young Midoriya. Nizu cleared his throat. Now I know this is unexpected, but as a school we must find a way to better our students. I am open to suggestions if you have any. It's clear Izuku can't be allowed into the heroes course. Vlad stated. All the teachers looked at him. What do you mean can't be allowed? Toshinori asked with just the slightest bit of anger. Vlad sighed. I don't mean he should be pulled from the program. What I mean is he is currently inexperienced with his new mutation. If the entrance exam proved anything, I feel it is in his best interest to take Quirk Council classes while his fellow classmates take the heroic course classes to help him catch up. That would be a smart choice if we don't factor in another aspect. His biohazard label. 13 added. I have nothing against biohazardous quirk, but we have to be realistic. Many people will hear the label and immediately push for his removal from the hero course, if not having him expelled from the entire school. They have a point. The label of his quirk is enough to cause a public outlash. Aizawa took this chance to finally ask, what exactly was his quirk originally? This was where Toshinori had to brace himself. By orders of his mother, we were told to allow young Midoriya to choose when he told the staff. The silence that followed was deafening. Then a loud slam was heard. What? Aizawa, please calm. This is unacceptable. We cannot expect to do our jobs properly if we don't know what reaction his quirk may cause on others. Aizawa, if you would let dash. I can't believe you Nizu would allow for this illogical idea to even be entertained. The notion that he could hurt another dash. The only person his quirk hurts is himself. Everyone remained silent. All Might had buffed up into his hero form. He was angry. This was what young Midoriya was talking about when he said lies about biohazardous quirks. Everyone always assumes it only hurts others. Young Midoriya has already had an accident with his quirk when it first appeared at the age of 3. He was hospitalized for 2 months before being allowed to go home and then proceeded to spend the next year doing test after test to understand the basics of his quirk. Because of this, young Midoriya is afraid of human contact. It is so terrible that I had mistaken it as signs of abuse. All the teachers felt a slight pang in their hearts. For this reason we had agreed to allow him to further explain his quirk when he felt it best. It is a way for us to build trust with the young boy. Aizawa could deny that he wanted to help the young man, but he couldn't in his right mind do so without all the variables. You ask us to go along with a plan that could cause more harm than to actually fix the problem? Yes. Aizawa stood up. I don't care what you decide to do, but know that I won't treat him any different from my other students just because you, All Might, stand behind him. With that, Aizawa left the meeting. Toshinori sighed, deflating. This didn't exactly go as planned, but it seemed by the looks of the other teachers that they would go along with the plan. Now let us explain the young man's schedule beforehand, shall we? Aizawa glared at the floor as he walked out of UA. It wasn't the first time he's walked out of a meeting, but it is the first time that he's felt that he may have overstepped a boundary. All Might had spent more time with the child and was obviously more knowledgeable in how the young man learned and responded to authority figures. He was also probably the only person beside the boy's parents who knew what his quirk was that he trusted. Aizawa groaned, placing a hand on his face. He let his fear of something happening to his son cloud his judgment in that moment that he acted irrationally. He looked down at his phone when it vibrated. He had 2 messages, one from Zashi and one from Shinso. He opened Zashi's first. I'll let you know what the plan for Izuku is later. He sighed knowing he was also going to talk to him about his outburst. He then moved to Shinso's message. Everyone else is leaving the... Are you going to pick me up or am I riding the train home? I'll pick you up. Aizawa sighed knowing this was far from over. Shinso stared at the 2 bickering blondes. They had been arguing for the entirety of the time they have been here. It was honestly annoying, but he was curious. He blamed his parents. Both of them were too nosy when it came to their jobs and those around them. Shinso was curious about Izuku and his whole demeanor. Izuku was kind, gentle, outgoing and shy, but he had this fierce need to protect those wronged by the system. It's a miracle that Bakugo even joined Izuku in his conquest. Nidaken, Kacchan, Toshiken. All 3 boys shot up and turned as one unit to face the sunshine green bean. He was running up to them waving his arm. Shinso smiled. Hey, what took you so long? Izuku stopped in front of them huffing and puffing. I have puffed to exercise more. Didn't answer the question, green bean? Minoma teased. Everyone looked at him. What? Izuku squealed before hugging Minoma. You gave me a nickname. Minoma paled before flushing a bright red. I did not. It was just a statement. Now get off of me. Izuku pouted. Meanie. Toshiken tells Nidaken to not be mean. Don't be mean, Nito. Minoma gasped at Shinso. Seriously? Both Bakugo and Shinso nodded. Minoma huffed. Rude. Izuku laughed. It's okay, Nidaken. Shinso snickered. Minoma was beet red. While Bakugo grabbed Izuku's hoodie. Enough, let's go already. Wah. With that, Izuku was half walking and half dragged towards the cafe. Shinso followed up behind him. Minoma sputtered before running after them. Hey, wait up. Izuku smiled at the excited faces of Shinso and Minoma. They looked around at all the cats and sectioned off areas. Bakugo was checking Izuku's online reservation. Once given the okay, Izuku ran into the back room and plopped himself on the bed. The 2 new boys looked around and noticed a faux bedroom setup. It had a king-size bed, multiple beanbags and a soft plush rug. Izuku twisted in the bed before curling up under a big fluffy green blanket. He took his gloves off and petted one of the cats. Katsuki took a bean bag on the floor. Minoma also took a beanbag, while Shinso plopped himself onto the bed. Now are you gonna tell us your quirk? Minoma asked, petting a furry Persian cat. Izuku sighed before sitting up. But what do you know about biohazardous quirks? Shinso remembers Izuku mentioning that part prior. Minoma sat up. Biohazardous quirks are quirks that involve a fluid and are dangerous to others and/or the user. Izuku perked up. Oh, it can hurt both? Yes. Shinso looked at Minoma, who blushed. I wanted to understand why my quirk council wanted me to learn how to identify different quirks by emitter, mutation, transformation, and biohazardous. So I did research on my own. Izuku smiled at this. Well, it looks like this would make my life a little easier. You see, I have a biohazardous quirk that is activated by skin-to-skin contact. It allows me to pull DNA from the person touching me to then combine it with my own to create a fetus. It took a moment before it clicked, but both boys shot up. Does this mean you give birth to children? That you have the female reproductive organs? Izuku stared at both boys. I guess I'm going to have to explain it a bit more. Yeah, I think that a given, Shinso says. Minoma moved from the floor to the bed. He had a mini notebook open. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Sorry, I just like to take a few notes when I learn about others' quirks to see drawbacks and advantages to see if I can use it at any time in my life. Izuku nodded. Makes sense. Okay, so your questions are quite similar, but to put it into a simple answer first, no, I can't give birth naturally because I don't have the female reproductive organs. Bakugo at this point has joined the group on the bed. He rubs Izuku's back. My quirk is a maladaptive type quirk that only partially grew the female reproductive system. I'm going to guess the womb? Shinso asked. It's called uterus eye bags? Kachin. Izuku scolded, but yes. It is located in a similar position to that of a female's uterus. Due to this, I could only give cesarean births. You mean C-section, right? Correct. Another aspect of my quirk is that the longer a person touches me, the more DNA I can gather to push into accelerating the fetal growth. Wait, what? How does that work? It works in the way that a single touch of about 20 seconds activates my quirk. After that, it takes a minute to actually synthesize and examine the DNA. After that, it takes another minute to actually find out how to combine the DNA, and finally, after 2 minutes, it starts to pull specific DNA from cells deep within the other person's body to fill in the gaps of DNA. For every minute that passes, the fetus grows and develops more and more. It has only one advantage I can think of off the top of my head, is that it negates any and all dangerous touch-based quirks. It also has a speed-up self-healing quirk that only activates when I've given birth to fix all the damage caused during pregnancy. So, it makes it look like you've never been pregnant? What? No, it just shortens my recovery time from 3 to 4 months to only 2 months. Both boys hummed at the information. Minoma looked thoughtful. What are the drawbacks? Ah, the fun bits. Bakugo grumbled. Yeah. For the most part, there is only the drawback of pregnancy. Also that my body remembers people's DNA sequences for up to 3 months after it's been analyzed. What about if you've given birth to a child? We don't know, but it's theorized that it's longer due to my body actually carrying a child. Another drawback is that if multiple people touch me, I will form multiple fetuses. Shinso whistled. That was a lot to take in. Well, it seems like the only time I'd ever ask to borrow your quirk is if me and my future husband decide to have children. Izuku then sputtered at Minoma's confession to not only finding it useful in one aspect but to being gay. He thinks. Back off, copycat. He has to agree to let you use it if his quirk doesn't negate it. My quirk isn't dangerous. Like hell it ain't. With that, the two blondes took to bickering again. Izuku laughed before grabbing a tablet of the nightstand next to the bed. What do you want to eat? After having left the cafe, the boys, not including Izuku, decided they would form a protection squad to keep Izuku safe. They made it to the train station where Izuku and Bakugo went home together, something about living close together. Minoma stayed to talk a while longer with Shinso before his train arrived. Shinso was smiling and relaxing on a bench when he heard the beep of his dad's car. He got into the passenger seat. How was your meeting? He grunted. Oh, that means it went bad. Well, my outing went well. We agreed to meet up in 4 days to go shopping for school supplies together. They're bringing their moms along to supervise the shopping trip. Who were they again? Katsuki Bakugo, Nito Monoma and Izuku Midoriya. His dad seemed a bit too interested in his friend. Then it hit him. The meeting had to have been about his quirk. Shinso tried to be subtle only to fail. You're not doing a good job at being subtle. I can't help it when a friend's quirk is being questioned. Shinso shot back with some bite. Both of them were caught off guard. Shinso at how quickly he was to defend the boy and Aizawa at how defensive Shinso was. It was clear now that the outing had been to talk about Izuku's quirk. If that was the case, it also meant Shinso had more information on the boy. I won't give up anything on him. He's one of the only people I've befriended, and I won't mess that up by saying your curiosity. Shinso's body language showed he wasn't willing to talk on the subject. Aizawa sighed as he stopped the car and let Mike get in. So, what did I miss? Oh, entirely too much. Hitoshi was quiet, and Hizashi hated it. Because it reminded him of when they first rescued him. Hizashi looked over at Shota and noticed how tense he was. He decided to ask Hitoshi about his day out. So, how was your outing, little listener? It was great. Izuku was running a little behind because he had a meeting this morning with Nizu. Hizashi noticed Shota listening intently to Hitoshi's recounting of the meeting. What about Katsuki and Monoma? Monoma was interesting to talk to. His quirk is copy. He has a good grasp and even takes notes of his peers' quirks to understand how they work and how well he could work with them. Smart. It didn't go unnoticed by Hizashi that Hitoshi looked at Shota with a side eye. It is. He also likes the color lavender and doesn't drink coffee. Says it is bad for his health. The heathen. Agreed. Hitoshi relaxed a little. Hizashi did too. Looks like his plan was working. What about the other one? Katsuki Bakugo, he's the angry Pomeranian. Blows just about everything up. Attitude on this is like no other. Though, Izuku seems to be able to reel him in. He drinks green tea and likes spicy sweets? No. Oh yes, Pops. He ate chili powder donuts. Shota laughed at Hizashi's face of disgust. Shinso chuckled. Yeah, both him and Monoma decided it would be a good idea for them to spend the 10-minute wait for Izuku yelling at each other. Shota groaned. Grit. A loud-mouthed blonde. Aren't you married to one dad? Shut up. Hitoshi then goes on to a tangent of when Izuku shows up to the cafe to what they ordered and talked about, which is interesting to say the least. Then Monoma was telling Bakugo that the X-Men had the right idea when it came to the word mutant. That it shouldn't be taken as a slur since that is what a quirk is, a genetic mutation. Well, I feel Bakugo is right. It's a slur. It was used as one and should be treated as one. Hizashi countered. I think you both are being immature children and it should be treated based on use. If someone is using it neutrally, then treat it as such and vice versa. Now, anything else? Hitoshi pondered it as they got out of the car. He perked up and looked at Hizashi. Are you free a week from today? I think so. If you are, can you join me and my friends on a mother-son shopping trip? Hizashi gasped. And mother? Why don't you ask Shota? He would be free. I would, but I don't think I'd trust him not to try and probe Izuku's mom for more information on Izuku's quirk. Shota sighed. Hizashi smiled at Hitoshi's somewhat teasing. He has a point. Besides, who doesn't want to show off that one of their parents is a pro hero? I also have to get some training equipment. This caught both men's attention. Training? Equipment? Hitoshi smirked. What, my hero friends are gonna help me get into your class, Dad? With that, Hitoshi went off to his room to do his own little thing. Hizashi smiled slowly, turning his head to Shota. So about the little listener's new schedule? Izuku was bouncing in place as his mom, Aunt Mitsuki and Kachin sat around him. It was a week from the cat cafe get-together. Izuku and his friends, he can't get used to the fact he had friends, are meeting up at the mall's entrance. Monoma said he explained to his mom about Izuku having a touch-based biohazard quirk and was still fine with them meeting up. Yet both Midoriya cried when they heard. Hitoshi had told him that he had gay parents and that his more sociable dad was coming. Inko said it was fine as long as he liked manicures and pedicures. They arrived last of the four families. Monoma and Hitoshi having a thumb war to pass the time. Tashikan. Nidakan. Izuku ran up to them waving. Bakugo kept in pace not far behind. They gathered around. Oh my gosh. Tashikan. You didn't tell us your dad was present, Mike. Don't go fanboy on us just yet. We still have shopping to do. Hitoshi said, holding up a credit card. Toshikin? My pops said he'd pay for everyone today since all the money from his 3 jobs is more than enough. But don't worry, little listener. I only give him 5% of every month's pay. Izuku was going to protest more but was suddenly dragged away by 2 blondes with Hitoshi taking the lead. The moms laughed at this while they started their walk into the spa section in the mall. Hizashi would never admit it to anyone, but he prefers female friends over male friends. Because they had the best ideas of relaxation. They were all currently in the Mad Spa getting back massages. They had booked a 4-pack for the whole experience treatment. It was a full-body massage followed by hot rocks, then a mud bath and finally mani pedis. He was having a wonderful time with all 3 of the mothers. Mitsuki Bakugo was married to Masaru Bakugo, who, by the way Inko described him, was a calm, mild-mannered man. Unlike his wife, who was just like her son, hot-headed, brash, loud and blunt. Yet somewhere between all her loud, brash nature was a kind-hearted woman who genuinely cared for those that she called family. Nicole Monoma is a European woman who married a small businessman here in Japan. She was charmed by the land and its people and decided to stay here. She is also one of the best court counselors in Japan. This is even more amazing when you take into account that she's quirkless. Not that there's anything wrong with quirkless people. Inko Midoriya. She is interesting to say the least. Her husband works in America and is rarely home, so it's more like she is a single mother to Izuku. She is very anxious, meek and soft-spoken, but under all that is a strong woman willing to do anything for her son. Currently, they were sharing embarrassing stories about their sons. This one time Izuku and Katsuki decided that they were going to fly and made these wings out of wire and blankets. Oh, I remember that. Izuku had convinced Katsuki he should do it since he was stronger. Yes, and then the brat went and jumped from the tree and crest-bladed against the ground. They all laughed at Inko and Mitsuki's retelling of the story. Hizashi was having fun and relaxing in a way he really couldn't do with the other pros. This was a nice change of pace. Oh, that reminds me, I wanted to thank you all. Hizashi perked up. Oh, what for? Well, it's just that Izuku's never really had any friends other than Katsuki growing up. If it wasn't because that found his quirklessness an issue. It was how he was always around the best possible hero in the making, and they didn't want him bringing Katsuki down. Which would be impossible because Izuku is smarter than Katsuki. Mitsuki added. It's no problem. I always encourage Nieto to be open-minded about others. Especially considering how I'm treated for not having a quirk. Inko smiled at Nicole. She's right. Hitoshi came to my husband and me after a terrible case of quirk discrimination. All the women gasped. His parents died in a car crash when he accidentally activated his quirk. He was taken to an orphanage that clearly had no intentions of treating the boy fair. It took until he was 12 when my husband saw him for someone to investigate the orphanage. After a year battling the orphanage and the country, we adopted our boy. Hizashi felt someone hug him. He looked down to see Inko tightly hugging him. He looked at the other women but was suddenly glomped by the other 2 women. He felt a crack in his dam brake. He had been holding back his emotions on the subject for the entire time because he was more focused on Hitoshi. He did tell some to Aizawa, but it felt like he was just adding more stress to him, so he kept it to a minimum. But for some reason here with these other parents he felt like letting go. They pulled back just enough to let go of the hug but not enough to be out of arm's reach. I've decided. Mitsuki, make a note of this. Inko grabbed both Hizashi and Nicole's hands. From today moving forward we are now friends, and as friends we will get together as often as we can have us days, tea time, and to support each other through whatever the other ones need. So no more of this bundling up emotions until you cry, Hizashi. Same with you, Nicole. If you do, I'm sending Mitsuki after you both. Hizashi felt a warm, friendly sensation in his heart. So he laughed. It was nice to have civilian parent friends. Izuku knew this was a bad idea. He knew it the moment Katsuki mentioned it. Yet here they were. In the plaza center, with 4 bottles of detergent. Katsuki thought it would be a fun idea to make a bubble fountain in the center of the mall so they could kick off the new school year as well as their new friendships. Izuku had said no, but Monoma said he'd never done anything this delinquently in his life. So Katsuki had to push the issue and convinced Monoma. Shinso had agreed without a second thought, saying, and he quoted, his parents' boss would have a field day hearing about this. So with 3-on-1 Izuku helped the boys with their scheme. The only problem, they added too much detergent. Well, how was I supposed to know that we were only supposed to use one? I think it would have been obvious, but hey, go big or go home. Kachin, Toshikin, let's leave before the security shows up, or worse, our parents. I think it's a little too late for that, Izuku. What do you? Oh, hi, Mom. All 4 boys flinched and looked up at their respective parents. They did not look happy. We got everything? Shinso tried to appease. We will talk about this at home. The boys' shoulders slumped down and they were led away to their doom. Arms filled with shopping bags and hearts filled with dread at their punishment. Aizawa's eye twitched as Nizu showed him the footage of his son and the 3 delinquents pouring 4 gallons of detergent into the mall fountain. Beside him, Nizu cackled wildly as he enjoyed Aizawa's face and the chaos these future students unleashed. Izuku smiled as Kachin, Nidakan and Toshikin met up at the front gate to walk in together. Izuku had noticed that a swing was set up and decided to swing while waiting. Kachin had laid down on the grass and was sleeping. It was strange having to wait on friends. Normally it was just Kachin and Izuku, the strange duo they had been called. Izuku slowly stopped the swing. It was weird. He had gone from having 1 friend to having 3 in the span of a month. Hey nerd! Izuku jumped at Kachin's sudden appearance in front of him. Izuku turned to look at him. Yes, Kachin? I see them, let's go. Izuku jumps off the swing and follows Kachin to the front gate where Toshikin and Nidakan are talking. Copycat. Ebegs. Let's go. Shinso took a deep breath. He likes hanging out with Izuku and Bakugo, don't get him wrong. It's just that his constant abrasive attitude was a bit much to deal with in the mornings. Monoma easily took the bag and both boys led the group inside while arguing. Izuku just laughed at their antics. Shinso sighed as they reached the parting point for the 3 different classes. Gen Ed on the 2nd floor, Support on the 3rd and the Heroes on the 4th. Shinso waved goodbye to the 3 hero students. He sighed slowly, dragging his feet into his classroom. Now he had to survive the whole day, minus lunch. Monoma glared at Bakugo. The arrogant little prick was claiming that his Quirk's copy of his explosions would always be inferior to the real ones. Monoma had countered that they can be more effective than his in any situation, as he was clearly the smarter of the 2. They stopped in between both doors. To the left 1A, to the right 1B. Monoma looked at Izuku. Until lunch. Make sure to keep the rabid Pomeranian in line for me. Monoma walked away as Bakugo let off explosions being dragged away by Izuku. He smiled to himself. Izuku had enough with Kachin and Nidakan for the day. So he dragged Kachin into the classroom and sat him on the desk all the way in the front to the corner closest to the window. What the hell? Izuku karate booped Kachin's head. Bad Kachin. No fighting in school. Kachin was going to say something again when the tall, stiff student from the entrance exam marched up to them. Please do not make such a commotion this early in the morning and at such a prestigious school. Also, the green broccoli boy is correct. Do not go attacking our fellow students in school. Who the hell do you think you are? Telling me what to do? Think you're better than Ak? Izuku gut shot Kachin, casting said boy to collapse in his chair. I apologize about Kachin. His egos have been inflated by others so much there's nothing but hot air inside. Shut up, nerd. Ida quickly composed himself after having witnessed such a display. Apology accepted. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Tenya Ida from Dash. Izuku Midoriya, pleasure to meet you. And this angry one is Katsuki Bakugo, but I call him Kachin. Ida looked a little peeved to have been interrupted, but let it go. I see you are the superior student, as you were able to see the deeper Dash. It's you. Ida was suddenly knocked over by a small brown-haired girl. Oh, nice girl. You did make it in. Yeah, I did. How was your ankle? After the exam I didn't get to see if you were okay. Oh, it was fine, with a quick kiss from Recovery Girl. What do you think we are going to do today? I don't know, but I would suggest we get into our seats. We don't know who the teacher is or how strict they are going to be. I agree. Everyone please find a seat and sit down to wait patiently for our teacher to arrive. Not even a second after the last grumbling student sat down did the door open. On the floor in a horrendous yellow sleeping bag was their homeroom teacher. Decent. Hello class, my name is Shota Aizawa. Come grab one of these and go outside. Izuku got up with everyone else. Aizawa-sensei seems nice. Quirk apprehension test? Izuku looked at his fellow students as they all gaped at their teacher. He looked over at Kachin, who just shrugged and handed him a mini notebook with a pencil. If you don't write about what's happening, you're going to mumble it. I'm going to mumble it regardless. It will make it easier to explain to these extras. Izuku nodded and opened it. He positioned his pencil at ready and started to write in time with Aizawa-sensei's monologue. Aizawa filtered his gaze over everyone. He noticed out of the corner of his eye how Midoriya and Bakugo exchanged some words before Midoriya started to write down everything he said. Note-taking. Smart. Plus ultra. He watched as they all had set looks of determination. 50-meter dash. Impressive. So far all the students were close to a 6-second average. Midoriya did decently with a time of 7.02. He paced himself to keep his breathing under control. He had also done some leg stretches while waiting his turn. The boy showed forward thinking. He was pacing his energy and avoiding possible cramps to allow him to give it his best shot at all the test. Aizawa also noticed him taking notes whenever one of the other students went. Interesting. Grip strength. That was unexpected. Midoriya scores above the average but not by much. No, what got Aizawa again was Izuku taking notes while watching the other students. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. What was Midoriya playing at? Standing long jump. Ignoring that score Midoriya had, Aizawa couldn't shake that something was strange. Midoriya continued to take notes while watching his classmates. In fact, it looked as if Bakugo would help by pointing out differences between different quirks, only for Midoriya to scribble away at a page or two before looking up to examine the next pair. Repeated side steps. While Aizawa could honestly say no one but Mineta got a high score on the side steps. He could however say that whatever was in Midoriya's notebook was valuable to both him and Bakugo. If Bakugo trying to blow up Kaminari was anything to go by. Ball throw. Aizawa watched closely as Midoriya walked up to the circle. He had handed his mini notebook to Bakugo. Midoriya stretched in the circle. Aizawa closed his eyes as Midoriya reeled his arm back to throw. His eyes snapped open just as Midoriya was about to release the ball. The ball fell flat at 43 meters. Midoriya looked confused and looked over at him. Aizawa barely opened his mouth when Bakugo's fist connected with Midoriya's head. What the hell was that nerd? It wasn't my fault, Kachin. Eraserhead erased my quirk right before I threw the ball. Bakugo hit Midoriya again. So what? Even without it you should have cleared 50, not 43. Midoriya dodged the next hit. Aizawa cleared his throat. Both boys looked at him. Are you done? Bakugo scoffed before walking back to the rest of the group. Midoriya sighed in defeat of the aggressive blonde. Midoriya looked at him. Sir, may I have another try? I think I figure something to do in the ball throw. Aizawa raised an eyebrow but complied. Midoriya reeled his arm back and released all of his power into one finger. Midoriya smiled while holding his hand. The machine beeped. Aizawa looked down and smiled into his scarf. 705.3 meters. Aizawa looked up as Midoriya regrouped with Bakugo only to have his head punched again. Maybe he was too quick to judge the boy. He could be a great hero. Lunch was going great. Currently Kachin, Nidaken, Toshikin and himself were on the roof of the school. Izuku was eating some onigiri. Kachan had spicy curry. Toshikin had beef stew on rice while Nidaken had some European dish called clam chowder. They were having a nice conversation and enjoying their lunch when the rooftop's door slammed open. They turned to see a panting brown-haired girl. She looked up and Izuku and Kachin recognized her. I found you. Uraraka? What do you mean you found me? I've been looking for you most of lunch because I wanted to hang out some more. Oh. Katsuki raised an eyebrow at her lack of a lunch bag. Oi round face, where's your lunch? Uraraka blushed. Oh well, you see I kind of, don't have one. The four of them looked at each other. Izuku was the first one to speak. It's not good to skip meals, Uraraka. Here you can have some onigiri. Oh no, that's why. Katsuki walked over and picked Uraraka up and brought her back over to their little circle. Soon she had a decent-sized portion of food in her lap on a set of napkins. Everyone had given her some of their lunch. Why you guys didn't dash? You're right, we don't, but heroes have to look out for each other, so don't take it too bad, Monoma said from his spot. Uraraka smiled at them before digging into her food. They ate in silence for a few moments. This is really good. What's it called again? Beef stew on rice. My papa decided to make an American-themed lunch today. It looks better than this white stuff. Hey, clam chowder is good. Everyone looked at Monoma like he grew another head. It does not look all that good, Shinso said, poking the chowder with his chopsticks. Okay, just because it doesn't look good doesn't mean it's bad. Looks like white chunky pus, Katsuki added. Take that back, you rabid Pomeranian. What did you call me? Uraraka watched as Bakugo and the other blonde boy argued. Midoriya and Purple One just sighed and kept eating. Uraraka smiled to herself. It was a nice environment. They all seemed relaxed with each other. Come to think of it, how did they all meet? Hey, Midoriya-kun, how did you meet everyone? The boys all stopped and looked at Midoriya, who smiled. Well, Kacchan and I have known each other since our moms were friends from high school. Damn straight nerd. So, he's always been this hot-headed? Who are you calling hot-headed? Yeah, pretty much. Uraraka nodded. I meet Toshikin on the train to the entrance exam when some unsavory teens dash. They were a bunch of quirkiest dicks. Toshikin don't use that vocabulary. But he's right. So I stood up to them and we just kind of clicked as friends, you know. What about Blondie? Oh, I met him at the entrance exam and sorta kind of most likely dragged him along with me. So you admit to forcing me to come along. Only that first time. Every time after that you've come along by your own choice. Uraraka giggled and slightly leaned against Midoriya. In a matter of seconds Midoriya was ripped from beneath her. She blinked as he was now behind all three boys. Did I do something wrong? Hell yeah, you. Kacchan, stop, she doesn't know. I don't know what? The boys looked at Izuku, who looked over at Uraraka. He sighed dejected. My quirk is activated by skin-to-skin contact. Uraraka's eyes widen. Oh my god, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I'm so sorry. No, it's not my fault for not telling anyone but these three. Uraraka glared at Izuku. You don't have to tell anyone anything if you don't feel like it. Izuku smiled at Uraraka. Thanks. Really, it means a lot. That being said, I'm joining your little squad. Wait, what? I'm joining your protection squad. I don't have a dash. Yes, you do. You have Bakugo the muscles. Shinso as a right-hand man and Monoma as maybe the brains? I could be the underestimated assassin. What? No dash. I like her. Izuku gave Monoma a deadpan look. Now is not the time. Fine, you want to join, you have to answer 3 questions right to do so. Bakugo growled. Bring it on. All right, 1. Is there such a thing as a villainous quirk? Shinso asked. No, only villainous people. 2. Can anyone be a hero? Monoma continued. Yes, with hard work anything is possible. Last, can someone with a biohazardous quirk be a hero? Bakugo asked smugly. Well, yeah, if they can control their quirk, they should be able to be a hero. The boys looked at each other smiling. Welcome to the Izuku Protection Squad, Uraraka. Izuku felt good about today. It was his second day at UA. Classes that day had been boring but normal. Nothing new or interesting until lunch. Wow, so we are the first class that gets to be taught by All Might. That's so cool. Shut it, round face, and eat. You'll be useless in class if you're falling over because you didn't eat. Jesus. Can't you say anything without yelling, you rabid Pomeranian? Shut up, you copycat. Can we not just have lunch where we're, I don't know, civil? With Kacchan, that's like asking an ostrich to fly. The hell do you mean, nerd? I can be civil. Izuku ducked a swipe of Kacchan's hand. This was nice. It had only been a little over 24 hours since, as Uraraka-chan dubbed them, the Izuku Protection Squad was formed, and so far it was chaotic. Nidakan and Kacchan both had some sort of friendly banter. Uraraka-chan and Toshikin normally either egged them on or just sat off to the side. Izuku also noticed that unanimously everyone brought a little extra food for Uraraka, who seemed content to only eat rice. Izuku will have to investigate that later. So what do you think we'll have to do this afternoon? Beats me as long as we learn something cool, or we get to blow something up. Do you think about anything other than blowing stuff up? Izuku smiled as they finished off lunch. I'm coming through the door like a normal person. Izuku smiled from his seat near Kacchan. All Might walked to the front of the class and pulled out an index card that read battle trails. Izuku sighed as Kacchan exclaimed that he was gonna beat the crud out of whoever he was up against. Of course you can't go out without your costumes. Izuku smiled as he grabbed his case. Kacchan and his mom helped him design it so that it was more practical and not so much a tribute to All Might. Well, it had looked more like a demented bunny. They had changed the color scheme to a dark forest green with gray and white accent marks. His second costume in the series. They had quickly changed and headed out. Once at the location, Izuku noticed that Uraraka-chan and Kacchan both flanked his sides. Izuku shook his head. Could they be any more obvious? Izuku looked up and noticed Nizu and Aizawa standing off to the side. Izuku tilted his head. Now before we start. Young Midoriya. Yes sir. You are to go with Aizawa and Nizu to the indoor gym. What? Why is the nerd being singled out? Yeah. Izuku put his head in his hands at Kacchan's and Uraraka-chan's yelling. Aizawa walked forward with Nizu on his shoulder. Midoriya's quirk went through a mutation in his last year of junior high. Because of this, he has to take extra quirk counseling classes to catch up to where he was before. Now, Midoriya, let's go, we're wasting time. Alright. Izuku tripped a bit over his feet as he ran after his teacher. He heard murdering from behind him, but he ignored it. They soon came up to a wall on the side of the school building. Aizawa placed his hand on a scanner and it opened. Izuku followed him inside to see Hound Dog and Recovery Girl. Aizawa turned to Izuku. Now from what we gathered, your original quirk was a biohazardous quirk, correct? Yes, sir. Now what was your mutation specifically? Izuku noticed how he avoided asking what his quirk was specifically. That was good. He didn't feel comfortable telling to many people. He didn't even tell Uraraka-chan, and she's part of his protection squad. My mutation absorbs energy from around me and allows for me to then turn it into an export of energy. Alright, activate your quirk. Izuku blinked before sighing and reaching into his mind to see if he could feel one for all. Once he felt it, he reeled his fist back and was going to punch the wall, but Aizawa-sensei deactivated his quirk and wrapped him up in his capture weapon. Did you see the problem? Oh yeah. Kid, you're using your quirk wrong. Izuku looked at Hound Dog, who crouched in front of him. How? You put all the energy inside you into one of your limbs. You'd need to disperse it throughout your whole body to avoid injuries. Izuku thought about it. That made sense. Also, you're acting like your quirk isn't your own. Like is not an extension of yourself. Oh, big OH's kid, but it can be fixed. For today we're going to have you power up your quirk by small percentages throughout your whole body to see the limits you have right now. Okay. Izuku was sore all over. They had to stop training every so often because his body was overexerting itself. For the most part, Izuku could hold 3 to 5% of One for All's power, which was good. But it could be better if he'd have to think up a solution to his current problem later. For now, he just wants to take a nap on his desk. There you are. Or not. Hey Uraraka-chan, how dash. You look like shit, nerd. I feel like it too. Kacchan scoffed. He grabbed Izuku's book bag and slung it over his shoulder. Hey Dash, you look like you're about to drop dead on your feet. Let's go before you actually drop dead. Izuku grumbled but complied. He didn't even notice that Uraraka had stepped over to where Monoma and Shinso were to let them know he wasn't up for much company today. He stifled a yawn. Man, he can't wait to get home. Aizawa reviewed the tape over and over. He couldn't understand how Izuku's quirk worked. If he had actually been pulling energy from the area around him, they would have felt a shift, temperature-wise or even a slight breeze, but nothing. If anything, it looked like Izuku was charging his quirk from inside, like it was a completely separate part of him completely. It didn't make sense. Aizawa closed his eyes. For now, he'd just have to keep a closer eye on his problem child. Everyone in class was seated and at attention when Aizawa-sensei walked into the classroom. He stood at the front. Now today we have something to do. The collective intake of air was easily heard by everyone. We are choosing class representatives. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly everyone was shouting over each other to be chosen for class representative. when Ida stood up saying they should vote for the position. Ida went to the front of the class and started to put everyone's names up. Izuku raised his hand. Yes, Midoriya? I would like to remove myself from the list. Whoa, why is that Midoriya, bro? Denki asked, looking over at him. Well, it's just that with the extra quirk training classes I just may not be able to juggle all the responsibility. Ida nodded, taking Izuku's name off the board. Uraraka also asked for her name to be removed. In the end, Izuku, Uraraka, Soji, Tokoyami, Jiro and Tsuyu had stepped down. Once the voting was complete, the representatives were Ida with 4 points and Yaoyorozu with 3 points. Ida gave his little speech when the results were announced that only half of the class listened to. Izuku couldn't wait for lunch. Izuku felt a hand on his shoulder. Bakugo, Uraraka and Izuku turned around to see Ida. Is everything okay, Ida? I was wondering why you three are always sneaking off during lunch? We just go eat on the rooftop with 2 of our friends. I see, but I must request that you all stay for today. I would like for the whole class to do a bonding exercise during lunch. Well, you see, Izuku. Izuku turned to see Toshikin and Nidaken. Oh hey guys, we were just you must be Midoriya's friend. It is nice to meet you. I am Uraraka and Izuku face palmed at Ida's manners while Bakugo tried not to laugh. They were standing in the hallway when the bell went off. They looked around before noticing a group of students rushing out of the cafeteria. Izuku was immediately pushed out of the way into a classroom. Next to him was Minoma. What did Your quirk and mine are touch-based, so it's best if we wait out the stampede in here. Izuku nodded as they both sat down and waited. After school. It was the reporters? Yeah, bunch of bats hit crazy idiots. If you ask me, Toshikin said. Toshikin, he's a right nerd. Fuckers can't take a hint. Kachin. Izuku laughed as he scolded his friends. It was nice to see them getting along. They arrived at the train station. Izuku waved as they all got onto different trains except Toshikin because apparently his parents would pick him up there. Izuku looked at Kachin and smiled. What's with the smiling nerd? Nothing, I just like the way things are right now. Bakugo scoffed but smiled. Maybe this school year won't be bad. Izuku watched as Hound Dog spoke with Aizawa. Apparently no one told Aizawa-sensei that Hound Dog would be joining the group on their trip today. Aizawa sighed and turned towards the group. Listen up. Hound Dog will be joining our class today. I expect all of you to be on your best behavior. Yes, Aizawa-sensei. Everyone boarded the bus. Izuku was last with Kachin and Uraraka-chan. He was about to go sit by Azui when Hound Dog stopped him. You're sitting beside me. I have to go over you part of the training. Izuku sighed but nodded, sitting down in the seat behind the driver's seat. Hound Dog sat next to him. Uraraka felt sort of bad for Izuku. He was constantly being pulled aside by the teachers. She knew it was for his own good, but the others gossiping about it didn't help. Man, I'd hate for my quirk to suddenly mutate. Looks like a hassle to have to learn all the basics again. Denki commented. He was suddenly elbowed by Mineta. Ah, what was that for? You shouldn't say that when he could hear you. Besides, it may seem bad short-term, but think about how much cooler it would be. Uraraka felt a little sick as some more classmates jumped in on the topic. Many said it was too much of a hassle while others claimed it could strengthen their arsenal. Finally, Bakugo had enough. Will you extras shut up? Everyone turned to look at him. Whether or not a sudden late mutation happens, only the person affected gets to decide if it's a hassle or not. So drop it or I'll kill you. Everyone grumbled at what Bakugo said, but Uraraka smiled thankfully at him. Suddenly, Aizawa-sensei stood up. We're here. Izuku was too busy going over the plan Hound Dog had for him to pay attention to what Aizawa-sensei and 13 were talking about. Hound Dog stood off to the side while scanning over the students. Finally, 13 addressed the class, allowing for a small lull in Izuku's thinking. He quickly understood what 13 was talking about. Both his quirks were dangerous in different aspects. One was a danger to everyone else with how it could easily kill. The second was a hazard to himself. Izuku sighed as 13 finished her speech. Aizawa-sensei took center and started to talk when the lights in the building went off. A purple portal opened in the center of the plaza. People started to walk through at an alarming pace. Izuku took a step forward to get a closer look. Don't move. Izuku flinched and looked over to Aizawa-sensei. He pulled his goggles up. There are villains. 13 Get the students out of here. Aizawa-sensei, you can't take them all on by yourself. Your quirk isn't suited for outdrawn battles. Your dash. You can't be a one-trick pony. Hound dog flank. Izuku watched as his teachers took to attacking the villains. Izuku heard his name being called by Ida. He turned and ran back towards the gate. The purple teleporter appeared in front of them to inform them that they were there to kill All Might. Izuku felt his blood run cold. What did he mean? He didn't get a chance to react when he was suddenly whisked away. Izuku felt weightless before feeling the wind rush past him. He barely opened his eyes when he saw the water down below. He'd looked around as soon as he was fully submerged. Out of the peripheral of his eye he noticed a man with a shark's head. He took a gulp of water by accident in his panic. He was going to die. Or not. Tsu kicked the man across the face. She shot out her tongue, grabbing Izuku. They broke the surface and Izuku was lowered safely onto the deck. Mineta landed next to him. Thanks, Azui. Call me Tsu. Alright. Izuku took a quick peek over the edge to notice the large group of villains. Oh boy. We need a plan. A plan? Izuku flinched at Mineta's loud voice. He was crying and blubbering. Are you crazy? We just need to stay put. Yeah, that's it, the pros will be here any second now. Izuku shook his head. I don't think so. What do you mean, Kero? Thinking back on it, it's strange. The alarms didn't go off. It was like they were jammed or something. You think they are jamming the signal? Izuku nodded. Not only that, but we don't even know if they are attacking other parts of the school. Tsu nodded while Mineta had a panic attack in the corner. One more thing is bothering me about the whole situation. Is the killing All Might part? Izuku nodded again. It didn't make sense realistically speaking. All Might had assured him that no many knew about his injury. Maybe someone had connected the dots. Was it even possible? Could someone have made the connection? What if one of the so-called trusted people was a spy? It didn't matter right then. Izuku looked at his classmates. They were scared he was not going to lie. But right now they needed a plan. Okay, I'm going to need you two to explain your quirks so I can devise a plan. My quirk is called Frog. I can do basically anything a frog can do. Izuku nodded, turning to Mineta. Oh, my allows me to pull off these balls on my head to stick onto anything but myself. Izuku nodded, looking down at his hand. My quirk allows me to absorb energy from the air and re-aim it outwards. Sadly, if I use too much energy I break my bones. The other two nodded when the ship rocket with tremendous force. Izuku looked over the edge again to see that the ship had been cut in half. Mineta freaked out and started pulling balls from his head. Wait, Mineta, we have to come up with a plan. Izuku looked again, noticing that the villains gave the balls space. Izuku smiled. They don't know our quirks? What? Think about it, Mineta. I'd completely overlooked this one key point. Azui. Call me Tsu. Tsu. Mineta looked confused. If they knew our quirks, Tsu would have been sent to the fire zone. He's right. Izuku smiles wider. And because of that I have a plan. Izuku stands up, walking up to Mineta and pushing him into Tsu. When I use my quirk on the water, I want you to jump us over to that edge of the bank, okay? Tsu nodded, grabbing Mineta. Mineta trembled. Izuku placed his foot on the edge and yelled at the top of his lungs before jumping down. He placed his arm out in front of him. Just moments before hitting the water it started. Now, smash. Izuku flicked into the water with 100% of his power. The water split and pushed everyone back. Izuku felt Tsuyu's tongue wrap around him as purple balls flew out of his peripheral vision. They landed in the water and turned just in time to see the villains all get caught up. Dude, your hand? Izuku looked down to see his purple finger. He sighed, wrapping it up. As he did that he looked over at the plaza. Aizawa-sensei and Hound Dog were fighting for their lives. We can go the long way around and avoid the plaza completely, but... What, are you crazy? That's suicide. Izuku didn't want to drag them into any more danger than they already were. He turned to Mineta. You guys go back to the entrance and see if the rest are there and who's missing. I'm going to look at Aizawa-sensei's fight. If everything is alright, I'll head up there. But if things are not, well, wouldn't it be better for us to stick together? Izuku shook his head. It would be better for someone to go inform the others while one scouts the teachers. Tsu looked conflicted. Not only that you two would make it there faster without having to wait on me. I'm not as fast as you, Tsu, and having to carry both of us would be difficult. I see. Alright, but as soon as I get there I'm dash. No, you can't come back. It would be too risky, just wait for me there. I promise not to get into a predicament. Mineta and Tsu both looked conflicted but relented. Tsu picked up Mineta and looked back once more before heading off. Izuku sighed before making his way back to the plaza. The water was his best bet of not being detected. Aizawa punched another villain in the face. His back was to hound dogs. They had been at this for a while. They had downed many of the villains. He looked around, noticing that the one-hand-covered villain just stood back. Go, I'll handle these last few. Aizawa nodded, racing up to the hand-covered villain. The hand-covered villain ran at him, muttering. Aizawa dodged the few villains that tried to stop him. He launched an elbow to the ribcage. He smirked. You know, it's hard to tell with you jumping around all the time. But when your hair drops down, you've turned off your quirk? Aizawa felt the familiar burn in his eyes and blinked. In that split second his elbow started to hurt. He jumped back and looked down. The bastard. It looked like he had disintegrated his elbow. Aizawa glared at the young man. Also, I'm not the final boss. Aizawa turned just in time to see the Nomu grabbed his head and smash it against the floor. Hound Dog heard the crash and turned to see Aizawa's head bleeding. Growing, he headed towards the duo. The Nomu looked up and launched Aizawa into Hound Dog. Hound Dog grunted at the sheer force hissing him in his abdomen and chest. Aizawa grabbed his face, keeping one eye open. Gu found out how to predict my quirk. I can tell. What now? Now we fight? Izuku looked over the edge of the area. He could see Aizawa-sensei and Hound Dog-sensei fighting and losing to the giant. Izuku gulped, looking around. It looked like there were no other criminals. He turned to leave when the mist man showed up again. Izuku was too far away to make out many words, but from the sound of it, it spoke trouble for the villains. Fine, let's go. But first let's leave a message for All Might. Izuku didn't even see the man move before he stood in front of him. His hand grabbed his face. Izuku felt his quirk start to stir. He felt panic build up inside him. Without any thought process he panicked. Let me go. Aizawa and Hound Dog both stuck to the one-strike dodge tactics. They were holding up pretty badly against the Nomu. They were more concerned with stalling to allow their students to regroup. Aizawa and Hound Dog hadn't even noticed Izuku was there until he screamed. They turned quickly and felt their blood freeze. Shigaraki had his hand on Izuku's face. Izuku was struggling to get out of his grip. The next bit of information was frightening. Aizawa went to turn off Shigaraki's quirk when the Nomu blocked him. Why isn't my quirk working? Izuku was in a panic. His quirk was active and was drawing DNA from the villain holding his face. He felt the villain let go of his face only to grab his arm and yank him out. His sleeve disintegrated, but his skin was unaffected. He felt his quirk search and reattach to the new point of contact. Izuku was blindly panicking. He grabbed at the man's hand, trying to get him to let go. How are you blocking my quirk? Nomu has Eraserhead busy. Izuku didn't register what the man had asked. He kept clawing at his arm in the man's hand. A hand suddenly grabbed his chin, forcing him to look the man in the eyes. What are you doing? Izuku felt something in him break. Tears spilled from his eyes. I'm sorry. The villain's eyes widened from behind the hand on his face. Izuku didn't even notice when he crumpled to the floor. The villain's hand still holding his arm. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to activate. I'm sorry. I can't control it. Please just let me go. Izuku kept repeating the phrase over and over. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please let me go. All these phrases confused the villain. What the hell are you babbling about? Izuku looked up and screamed. It's my quirk. It's a biohazardous quirk. People can't touch me. WhatIf? Let him go, you bastard. Bakugo launched an explosion at the hand fetish villain holding Izuku by his arm. Bakugo had no way of knowing how long the bastard had held onto Izuku. Bakugo looked back at Izuku, who had curled in on himself. He had one hand on his face and the other on his arm. He looked completely out of it. Bakugo growled as a surge of ice encased the Nomu. Aizawa-sensei and Hound Dog were both panting harshly. It looked like the Nomu couldn't decide between two targets and had trouble focusing on one. Because of this, it looked like the worst of the injuries was Aizawa-sensei's limp arm. Both teachers started to race towards Izuku and Bakugo. Bakugo looked back again to see the son of Endeavor and the redhead that he got separated with. "Midori bro, are you okay?" Izuku didn't answer. Instead he groaned and clutched his abdomen. He bent over in pain just as Aizawa and Hound Dog made it over to them. "What happened?" Aizawa growled as Hound Dog kneeled next to Izuku. Bakugo didn't get a chance to answer as the Nomu freed itself. The teachers got ready to fight when the front doors slammed open. They turned their heads to the door to see All Might standing there. "Do not fear, for I am here." Toshinori was not smiling. He looked around the USJ. The students near the entrance looked both terrified and relieved to see him. He ground his teeth. He should have been here. He should have been present to stop them from hurting his students. Toshinori moved down to the plaza where he met Aizawa and Hound Dog. "All Might." Aizawa sighed out, "Midoriya is dash. Young Bakugo, please take young Midoriya away from the plaza center." Bakugo nodded. Kneeling in front of Izuku, Toshinori placed a hand on Izuku's head. "Who hurt you, my boy?" Izuku looked up, slightly grunting at the pain in his abdomen. "T the O1W with T the H hands?" Toshinori nodded. Bakugo picked up Izuku bridal style. "You better avenge him, All Might. Because if you don't, I will." With that, Bakugo left. Kirishima looked at All Might with a determined look. "I'm going with him to make sure Midori bro is okay." He left after Bakugo telling him to wait for him. Todoroki nodded in the direction of All Might before following Kirishima. Nodding in the boy's direction, Toshinori turned back to the villains. "I will take care of the big guy. You two take care of the other two." Aizawa and Hound Dog nodded. Toshinori gritted his teeth. This was for hurting Izuku. Bakugo ran as fast as he could with Izuku in arms. He didn't stop. He had to get Izuku to Recovery Girl. He had to get him to someone who could save his life. For the first time in years he felt fear. He hadn't noticed he was back at the entrance until Shoji tried to take Izuku from him. "Bakugo!" He was touched by Handyman down there. "He needs medical attention." Bakugo heard a gasp. He figured it was Round Face as he ran towards the open door that All Might left. "Maybe one of us should dash. I make him like Bakugo. Mina, stay with 13. Uraraka touched Izuku's shoulder. Both of them ran out of the building. Bakugo felt like his legs were on fire. His lungs couldn't get enough air into them. "Bakugo! Uraraka! What are you dash?" Principal Nizu Izuku was touched. "We need to get him to Recovery Girl." "Oh dear. Recovery Girl?" Bakugo slowed down as the teacher approached him. He could faintly make out the sound of an approaching car. "Bakugo dear, I need you to let go of Izuku." Bakugo looked up and noticed a white van with a stretcher in the back. The van's back seat had been removed to make it into a makeshift ambulance. Bakugo handed Izuku over to Vlad King, who set him on the stretcher. "Bakugo, you and Miss Uraraka please accompany Recovery Girl to the room. Izuku is going to need you there." "Yes, Principal Nizu." Bakugo and Uraraka got on as Vlad King got off. One of the many workers drove them and Recovery Girl back toward school. Izuku groaned. Bakugo and Uraraka both made the mistake of looking. Izuku's stomach was moving and expanding. Uraraka looked at Bakugo, who had gone pale. "Bakugo!" His eyes snapped up to Uraraka. "I don't know what is happening, but I don't care. Right now we need to focus on getting Izuku to the room." Bakugo nodded, looking back down at Izuku. He grabbed his hand, giving it a little squeeze. He had to be strong, for Izuku. All Might glared at the man across from him. He'd just finished his fight with the Nomu, as the man called him. He looked to his right where Aizawa was. The mist man had launched a dust cloud at Aizawa, blinding the man. Hound Dog had then been wrapped away to the water zone. "You cheated. You couldn't have beaten my Nomu. You were supposed to be weakened. HMP, you think I can easily be stopped? You're wrong. Now I'm going to bring you in and have you pay for hurting my student." The man stopped his rant. "Your student?" "Ah yes, the green-haired boy. He was rather strange." Shigaraki dashed. "Shut up, Kurogyri." Shigaraki turned to All Might. "I see. You have a favorite. Whatever his quirk is, it stopped my decay? Yes. After I killed you. I'll kidnap him to find out." All Might cursed himself as Shigaraki moved towards him. One, because he was out of time and if he moved he'd detransform. Secondly, he just put an even bigger target on young Midoriya's back. Shigaraki was just inches from his face. All Might braced himself for what would be his demise. If only it were. A gunshot rang through the building as Shigaraki's hand started to bleed. A few more shots rang out. Kurogiri quickly gathered Shigaraki and they left. Not without some chilling last words. Next time we meet I will kill you, All Might. All Might felt his heart slow down. The students were safe. All Might felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Hound Dog. You can detransform, the students are outside. All Might let his form go. He deflated, taking a deep breath. Now that was taken care of, he needed to go see Izuku. He took one step before a hand grabbed his arm. Toshinori turned his head slightly. Grabbing onto his arm with a vice grip stood Aizawa. His eyes were bloodshot red. You are going to tell us exactly what Midoriya's quirk is now? Aizawa all but growled. Toshinori knew he could keep the secret anymore. Izuku's quirk had activated, there was no way to keep it a secret. Before Toshinori could give an answer, Nizu showed up on Vlad King's shoulders. Aizawa, let go of All Might. He needs to dash. We are holding a meeting with Izuku's mother tomorrow to explain Izuku's quirk. Now, let All Might go and all three of you go see a doctor. Aizawa glared at Toshinori. He let go and limped towards the entrance. Hound Dog looked between them before following Aizawa. Toshinori sighed, looking up. Nizu, did Midoriya dash? He is currently with Recovery Girl, Miss Uraraka and Mr. Bakugo. Toshinori nodded. I'm going to make a few phone calls on my way to the hospital. I'll let Miss Midoriya know about Izuku's condition. Nizu nodded as All Might was led away by Cementos. Nizu felt Vlad King scoff. This could have been avoided. We had no idea there would be a villain attack. Nizu responded. Aizawa glared at his class as they clamored over each other to ask about Midoriya. They were worried, scared even for their fellow classmate. Silence. They all shut their mouths. Now Midoriya's condition will be known to you as soon as we are informed about it, but for now you all need to get back to class. You will be let out one by one after you've each given your witness statement to the police. Understood? Yes, Sensei. Aizawa nodded, turning to Mike. Make sure they get to class. Right? Aizawa limped his way towards an ambulance and got in. His head was spinning with the events of the past hour or so. Izuku's reaction was the main thing that kept replaying in his head. He tried to cancel the boy's quirk but was blocked off by the Nomu. He was terrified and clearly whatever his quirk was, it caused him fear. Then the painful expression on his face. He wasn't hurt, there was no blood, no bruising, so what exactly did this Shigaraki villain cause? Aizawa laid back onto the stretcher. Whatever it was, they would have their answers tomorrow. Toshinori sat in the car waiting for Naomasa to finish up with the students' witness reports. He had called Inko, who had told him that Bakugo and the rest of the Izuku protection squad were with Izuku. Izuku had a protection squad. Now his finger hovered over the call button. He needed to know, but at the same time it would be a waste if Izuku didn't want to allow him to. Toshinori sighed, pressing the annoying green button. It rang twice. Hello. Hello, Mirai. Toshinori, what do I owe the pleasure of this call? Toshinori sighed. It is about my successor. He's been hurt and I need to know if you can use your quirk on him. The line was silent. Toshinori almost expected Mirai to have hung up on him. You want me to use my quirk on your successor? Only if he agrees to it. Well, if you need me to, I will consider it. Now what exactly is the boy's injury? Toshinori sighed, knowing this was no easy thing to say. The boy's original quirk is a biohazardous quirk. It activated and he's now with Recovery Girl. She's stabilizing him as we speak. What? Toshinori moved the phone from next to his ear. You mean to tell me that you gave someone with a dangerous quirk one for all? Do you not remember that it? Of course I remember. Toshinori yelled back. Mirai went silent. I knew what could happen when I gave him one for all. I expect we'd have more time for him to master both of his quirks, but now Toshinori stifled a sob. Now the boy is going to suffer because of my incompetence. Both him and the child. Wait, child. Toshinori wanted to scold himself for letting that slip, but he couldn't take it back. That's if the fetus survives. Only if it survives. Shigaraki grunted as he landed on the floor. The wounds on his arms and legs hurt. But nothing could hurt as bad as the shame and anger he felt. His plan, his Nomu all fell apart. He growled at the thought of All Might being praised by the stupid masses. Tamura, do not worry. Even with failure you can still learn. I will kill All Might and that stupid green-haired freckled brat. Green hair and freckles? Tamura looked up at Sensei. There was a green-haired brat there that blocked my quirk? Intriguing. Anything to add on this Kurogyri? Only that the boy panicked when Tamura touched him. He also called his quirk biohazardous. Interesting. What's so interesting about a panicky crybaby? You see, Tamura, I may know the boy you are speaking about quite well. Both Tamura and Kurogyri looked at the screen. Kurogyri had moved to bandage up. Tamura stopped to hear his master's next words carefully. How? Tamura, I am a man after all. It is obvious I've let my primal urges get to me at times. How can you be certain? Any brat could have green hair nowadays. Yes, but only one has my freckles and a severe fear of touch. That brat dashed. Yes. That brat is my son. Green hair the color of a forest canopy like his mother, with emerald eyes and a diamond formation of freckles on his cheeks. Tamura felt his heart stop. He almost killed Sensei's son. He hurt Sensei's son. Sir, if I may ask, what is the boy's quirk? To answer that I must know. Shigaraki, how long did you hold on to the boy with bare skin-to-skin contact? Shigaraki looked up with wide eyes. His legs throbbed in pain as Kurogyri pulled out bullets. 10 minutes, more or less. Well then, I congratulate you, Shigaraki. You are going to be a father. Shigaraki felt cold at his sensei's words. What? Sir? Sensei smiled. My son's quirk is called Touch Fertility. It allows him to create a living child with a combination of both his DNA and the person who touched him. So to simplify things, Tamura, you are the father of the child my son will undoubtedly carry to full term. Shigaraki grabbed his chest. He was a father. He was going to have a child. With Sensei's son. That last part stuck with Shigaraki. His face went from complete and utter shock to gleeful joy. He was now blood related to his sensei. He was the future father of Sensei's grandchildren. They would have a powerful quirk to help him take down this corrupt and unjust society. All for one shot of the monitor connecting him to the bar. He sighed. It had been too long since he thought about his son, the young boy named Izuku. He is not ashamed to admit that one woman had caught his heart not long ago. She had been a soft, kind person in this cesspool of a world. She had loved him enough to gift him a child. If only his child did not suffer. All for one had been informed by a teary-eyed Inko about his son's quirk. That day, when all else was asleep, he attempted to correct it. All for one looked down at the boy he called his son. He was broken. His quirk had destroyed most of his lower organs and bones. It was sad, really. Inko had not been allowed into the room yet, but it did not matter. All for one was to remove the quirk and kill his child. They could always have another. He placed his hand on the boy to steal the quirk and then destroy it. However, the minute he touched it, multiple quirks in his arsenal were forcefully pulled out of him. He yanked his arm back just in time to see a dimming blue light around Izuku. He searched through his catalog of quirks and almost felt proud. The boy's quirk had stolen 3 healing quirks, a quirk inhabilitado and a small energy shield quirk. He then glared at the body of the brat that dared to steal from him. He reached out to end the boy's life when 2 things happened. One was the shield quirk activating and the other was a pull at his quirk. He threw himself back out of the reach of the pull. He glared at the brat. He could feel it. The boy's quirk was sentient. It had a sense of self-preservation and even some ability similar to his own all for one. But why did? Of course. It was combined with Inko's attraction. It must have combined and mutated to create itself. All for one knew deep down this was a possibility, but to see it in action. No, it was worse than he thought. The brat's quirk was mutating more. It was combining all the quirks it had taken and adding them to his original quirk. In fact, when All for One got closer again, the energy shield gave off an explosion. He growled to himself. He had gotten careless, and now there is a third party in his battle against One for All. He shouldn't think that. No, this quirk will never be useful. In fact, Izuku may never recover from this trauma. Yes, he should leave before the boy awakens or the others show up. With this, All for One left the family he started. All because of a quirk that would kill to keep its holder alive. All for One was curious to why the quirk hadn't taken both Bakugo's and Shigaraki's quirks, but it had his own. Was it because he had many, or was it because it had no use to steal them? All for One leaned back into his chair. No, for now he must buy his time. He must greet his hands on his son again. If only to learn how the combination works. All for One smiled to himself, knowing that Tamura would most likely bring the boy to him. Besides, being the grandfather gives him the right to see the monstrosity. Recovery Girl had Bakugo push the stretcher into the room alongside her. They got to the door and Bakugo turned towards Uraraka. Round face, go get the rest of the squad. Have them guard the door. Uraraka nodded, turning around and heading off to find the rest of them. Bakugo looked down at Izuku. He was grunting in pain. There was a noticeable bump on Izuku's abdomen. Bakugo set a hand down on the bump. He felt movement from underneath. Bakugo! Bakugo removed his hand and looked up at Recovery Girl. She looked concerned. I need you to focus. Now his medical records luckily included the formula for the IVs specifically used for Izuku. They are a light yellow color. I need you to bring me 6 of them. Bakugo nodded, heading into the closet Recovery Girl had pointed to. Bakugo came back and froze. Recovery Girl had cut open Izuku's suit to reveal the bump better. It wasn't too big, so the fetus couldn't be that far along, right? How far along is he? Bakugo asked, handing the IVs to Recovery Girl. She looked at Izuku closely. I'd say just about 12 to 15 weeks along. It's not too big, but we can't be certain. The bump isn't the best way to tell how far along someone is. Bakugo nodded. Izuku then arched his back as his abdomen stretched once again. This time it was visible to see the movements from underneath the skin. Bakugo felt dizzy, sick and fearful all at once. To him, he was back in his room, back when they were 3. Bakugo watched from around the corner as his mother cried. His father held her close, letting her cry as tears also streamed down his face. Bakugo didn't know what was going on. He only knew that Izuku had gotten hurt by his quirk, whatever it was. Hey Hag, what's wrong with Izuku? Both his parents looked up in shock. Bakugo held his head up as his mother's eyes filled with tears again. His dad was the one who finally explained what had happened. He, Katsuki Bakugo, future hero, had almost killed his best friend. His father had told him it wasn't his fault, but who else could it have been? It was his half of the DNA. It was his blood that almost killed Izuku. He was a monster. No. Bakugo remembers the moment he promised himself to make sure no one else hurt his best friend. The moment Izuku became afraid of his own mom. He swore it. He swore it. God damn it. Recovery Girl jumped from where she was standing. Bakugo had gone catatonic. Nothing she did brought him back to focus, so she just moved him next to the door. He had crumpled to the floor in tears and screaming in agony. It was as if the pain Izuku felt was being mirrored in Bakugo. Uraraka opened the door and noticed Bakugo on the floor. She looked up at Recovery Girl. Take him outside and calm him down. Izuku doesn't need this right now. Uraraka gave a single nod to signify her understanding. Pulling at Bakugo's wrist, she got him outside the door. She barely closed the door when Bakugo crumpled against her, crying. It's my fault. I shouldn't have interfered. I should have kept him safe. Uraraka wrapped her arms around Bakugo and held him close. She didn't know what Izuku's quirk was. She didn't know why Bakugo felt like everything was his fault. She didn't know anything about her so-called friends, and it hurts. She felt the tears well up in her eyes. She snuggled her face onto the top part of Bakugo's head. Silent tears of her own dripped down her face. It hurt not to know what was causing her friends so much pain. She just wants to help, but she can't even do that. So she just sat in front of the door. Bakugo's top half sprawled across her lap, hugging her torso, crying, while she hugged him back, face buried in his hair. This was the position the others found them in. Monoma had sent Uraraka back to the infirmary to keep Bakugo grounded. He was panicking. Izuku was pregnant. There was no easy way to process it. Izuku had been touched for an extended amount of time. That meant his quirk had to have gotten to work pulling and combining the DNA of that bastard villain and their friend. Minoma was running down the halls to Class 1C. He had texted Shinso to be ready to go as soon as he got there. Minoma felt terrible. He had thought about how many of his classmates spoke poorly of their sister class. He did as well, but he always mentally excluded Midoriya. Now he was probably going to be the only one with any media attention. Minoma stopped just a hallway away from the classroom. Tears welled up in his eyes. They were supposed to protect Izuku. They were supposed to be heroes in training. Minoma jumped at a hand landing on his shoulder. "Are you okay? You shouldn't be out of class." "Guys, I think he was having a moment." Minoma blinked and wiped his eyes quickly. Standing there were 2 boys and a girl. Upperclassmen by the looks. Sorry, I have to get my friend. We're needed at the infirmary. Please excuse me." "Whoa." Minoma pushed past the blonde upperclassman and threw open the classroom door. "Shinso, we're needed. Izuku got touched and Recovery Girl has requested us to be there." Minoma turned running down the hall, not waiting for Shinso. He was scared that Izuku would be alone, having to give birth to a monster's child. Shinso ran out after Minoma. He noticed 3 people standing in the hall as he left. A blonde, an emo elf, and a periwinkle girl. Shinso scoffed as he raced behind Minoma. "Hey, wait up? What's wrong?" Shinso didn't bother to answer. He ran, and ran, and ran. God, it was terrifying to realize that the very thing they didn't want Izuku to suffer was actually happening. In a way, Shinso could also hear his dad's late-night nagging at Pops. "We don't know what his quirk is, Aizawa. Exactly why we shouldn't allow for him to just join. So what, we let the little listener down and disappoint him just like everyone else has done so in his life? You don't know that. I may not know it, but you know how quirkiest our society is. Yes, I would know our son came from such a place. Then why can't you give the listener a bit of blind faith? It's hard when the very quirk they are trying to keep secret could very well kill him." Shinso wasn't supposed to hear any of it, but he did. He understood that his dad was scared. No, worried that the boy might hurt someone, but to kill himself? I looked up the statistics. 89% of all children born with biohazardous quirks die before the age of 20. Uraraka. Shinso looked up. Uraraka and Bakugo were on the floor in front of the door leading to Izuku. Both had tear-stained faces. Minoma stopped next to them. "Are you guys okay? What happened?" Shinso stopped next to Minoma and helped Bakugo off of Uraraka. Minoma helped Uraraka up just as the door opened. "I need some help in here." "What do you need help with?" The 4 teens turned. The upperclassmen from before were standing behind them panting. Recovery Girl looked at them and sighed. "Heido, Amajiki, please keep these 4 calm and occupied out here. Togata, please help me with Izuku. He needs support right now. The hell are we letting some extras help Izuku? What the hell?" Immediately, tentacles wrapped around the teens. The girl stood between them and the door while the blonde followed Recovery Girl inside. "Don't you dare hurt Izuku." Togata looked back and smiled. "Don't worry, I won't." Mirio closed the door behind him. He looked at the scene in front of him. There was one of his kohais laying in one of those birthing beds for pregnant women. He was on his back panting. Green hair stuck to his forehead as tears streamed down his cheeks. Mirio didn't know what was going on, but he did know one thing. He promised to not hurt the boy, so let's see what he can do. "Hello, kohai. I'm Dash." "Ara." The boy arched back as his abdomen moved and expanded. Mirio quickly grabbed the boy's hand. Recovery Girl had set up 5 IVs which were draining quickly. She also rolled in multiple containers of tube feeding. She got out a tube. "What are you doing?" "I have to set up a temporary feeding tube. His body is currently drawing all the spare nutrients from his body. However, he doesn't have much to spare. While his body fat level is normal for his age, it may not be enough to sustain both him and the baby. He needs fluids and nutrients pumped into his system just to keep him alive. He's currently gone through 78% of his natural body fat." Mirio nodded as his kohai relaxed. He looked down and realized then that he was helping a pregnant boy. "Wait, how did Dash?" "No time." Mirio closed his mouth as Recovery Girl leaned over Izuku. "Izuku dear, I'm going to have a tube placed in your mouth down to your stomach. Do I have your Dash?" "I give consent to anything, just make sure we're okay." Mirio expected Recovery Girl to yell at the boy, but she didn't. Mirio helped her move the containers of feed onto a nearby table and set up the tube. They connected it and immediately it started to draw the food down the tube. Good, now we need to make sure Izuku is comfortable and dash. A beep from the machine startled them. 2 of Izuku's IVs were empty, with 1 almost done and 2 halfway done. The feed itself was halfway done as well. Mirio felt his heart clench. If this was how fast his body was draining outside nutrients, then how fast was it draining his internal nutrients? Recovery Girl called him to help her. God, he hopes he can save his Kohai. Bakugo struggled against the upperclassman's quirk. Both Copycat and him were still being held by the emo bastard, while Roundface and Eyebags were sitting next to the blue bitch. Bakugo glared at the door separating him from his best friend. He growled as the emo bastard was looking at the door too. He was concentrating on keeping his eyes level with the doorknob. Bakugi felt a kick to his left leg. He glared at Copycat. What the hell was that for? To get you to calm down? Monoma responded calmly. How can I? Izuku Dash is with Recovery Girl, a seasoned professional medical doctor that has insight on how to help Izuku. Monoma turned to face Bakugo. While I don't know the history between you and Izuku, I do know that you feel very responsible for his well-being. Bakugo grunted to acknowledge his statement. That being said, it's possible we could interfere with Recovery Girl's work. Bakugo opened his mouth. It's also why hospitals refuse to allow families to operate on family members. Bakugo grumbled but nodded his understanding. That being said, if I hear one more scream, I'm breaking the door down. Monoma growled, a shadow casting over his eyes. Bakugo gained a feral look. You're on. Shinso hugged Uraraka closer to him as she sniffled about Izuku. Shinso glared at the girl in front of him. She was standing between him and his friends. In retrospect, he couldn't blame her. They were all afraid for Izuku and couldn't really think straight. Now that they have had a bit of time, they were processing just what happened. Shinso would be the first to admit he and the others had poor reactions to Izuku getting hurt. Granted, now it was Izuku and the fetus. Crap. Uraraka doesn't know Izuku's quirk. Shinso sighed loudly. Hey, you two. What do you want, Eyebags? I'm going to fill Uraraka in on Izuku's quirk. Both Monoma and Bakugo looked at each other, then nodded. She's going to find out soon. Might as well tell her. Both teens said at the same time. Shinso nodded, turning to Uraraka. Shinso, you don't dash. We should have told you sooner. Now, instead of it being Izuku, I'm going to tell you. Uraraka held his hand for comfort. Shinso squeezed it. He didn't like to betray people's trust, but this once he was going to have to. Izuku's original quirk is called Touch Fertility. In a basic rundown, anyone who touches him has their DNA siphoned and copied. The copied DNA then gets mixed with his own and implanted into his uterus. Wait, you mean Izukin in a walking baby-making machine? That's one way to put it. Uraraka looked down, mumbling to herself. She stopped when she realized something. That's why you guys yanked him away when I leaned on him. Yes. Oh crap. I'm too poor to be a mom? Uraraka yelled. Wait, that means? She got quiet, thinking about something. Uraraka growled, standing up, turning to walk away from the nurse's office. Amajiki shot a tentacle out to grab her. Where are you going? Shinso asked, scared at the sudden death aura she had. I'm going to find that handsy fucker and kill him for violating our Izukin. The boys were confused for a moment before it clicked. Technically, Izuku had been violated, taken advantage of, dishonored, soiled, raped. Bakugo growled. After I make sure he's okay, I'm with you, round face. Me and Shinso can keep him company. Monoma gritted out. Shinso stood up, shaking. Oh, trust me, it would be better to beat him within an inch of death. Then we can drag his half-dead corpse back for him to face justice against his crimes. They didn't get another chance to say anything because the door to the nurse's office opened. Mirio stepped out. Recovery Girl said you guys could come in, just be quiet. Midoriya-san is asleep. Mirio watched as his Kohai relaxed. It had been a little over an hour since he had been touched and forcibly activated his quirk. Recovery Girl did a quick ultrasound when his Kohai gave her a weak thumbs up about his quirk turning off. He still had 2 IVs to get him back up to his normal hydration, and he was finishing off another container of liquid food. Recovery girl hummed as she looked around the small bump of a pregnancy belly. It looked to be just about 4 to 6 months along, according to Recovery girl. His kohai struggled to stay away so he could see. Mirio had taken to wiping off the sweat that covered the boy's face and neck with a cold rag to help. Recovery girl hummed. Is every asterisk gulp asterisk everything okay? His kohai asked nervously. Everything looks okay. As far as I can see, the baby looks to be the size of an avocado, so that puts you around 16 weeks or about 4 or 5 months, depending on how you group months. The reason I hummed is because the fetus looks further developed than its size. Is that bad? No. It's surprising but not bad. But enough questions. You need rest. Especially now. Are you going to talk about Dash? I'm not aborting. Mirio jumped at his kohai's determined look. He hadn't expected him to respond. I was Dash. I made up my mind years ago. I would never abort a child of mine because of how they were created. I know it may be hard for some of you to understand, but I can't bring myself to hurt an innocent life. I'm a hero. I protect people. I don't kill unless it's 100% needed. My child, my baby, while not conceived in a natural, decent manner, is still my child. They are still innocent of all crimes and accusations. Mirio looked in awe and concern at his kohai. While his determination was admirable, he was also worried about his declaration. He would let it sit for now, but he would bring it up later. His kohai leaned back and slowly fell asleep. Mirio looked at Recovery girl who was cleaning up. You can calm Midoriya's friends in. I'm sure when he wakes up he'll want familiar faces around him. Mirio nodded and proceeded to open the door. The protection squad scrambled in and placed themselves around Izuku's bed. They checked over Izuku to make sure he was okay. Mirio and his friends took the wall with the window to lean against. Recovery girl cleared her throat. I will inform you all about Izuku's condition since you all are now involved. Izuku appears to be around 4 or 5 months pregnant due to the size of the fetus. Due to Izuku's request prior to any of today's events, the fetus will not be aborted and thus Izuku will be under observation during his pregnancy. Because this was so abrupt, Izuku will be taken to the hospital tomorrow to be thoroughly examined to make sure the fetus is developing well. That being said, none of this information leaves the room to any of the other students, understand? Yes, Recovery girl. Could Bakugo contact Izuku's mom to inform her of what happened? Bakugo nodded and stepped out of the room. You can either stay here and sleep on some futons or you can go home, but you are all expected here tomorrow. Understood? Yes, Recovery girl. Good. Now if you will excuse me, I have paperwork to do and people to inform about Izuku's condition. With that, Recovery girl left the room. Now all that was left was a waiting game. Bakugo looked scared but determined. In his hand he held his phone. He knew what he had to do. It was necessary. That, however, didn't mean that it was easy. He took a deep breath and hit the annoying green button. Hello? Katsuki, is everything all right? Auntie Inko, you might want to sit down. Katsuki? I failed, Auntie. Bakugo felt tears in his eyes. I failed to protect Izuku. The line was silent while Bakugo tried to wipe away his tears. Is Izuku okay? Yeah. Recovery girl tended to him and said he was okay. She wanted me to inform you of how he was. But he's alive. He's been seen by a doctor, and the baby? Bakugo felt his throat close up a little. The baby? The fetus? That bastard's child. Bakugo felt an explosion go off in his hand. He took a deep breath. Now what, not the time to lose his cool. It's fine. The old lady said it was about the size of an avocado. An avocado, so around 4 or 5 months then? Yeah. She also said tomorrow morning they were going to take him to the hospital to make sure everything was okay. Yeah, that would make sense. So, what do you dash? The protection crew is staying here tonight to make sure Izuku has someone familiar here. Protection crew? You mean Shinso and Monoma? Yeah, and a friend of ours, Achiko Uraraka. Some upperclassmen that we ran into might also stay. 2 boys and a girl. Well, with at least one girl there, I'm sure Izuku will be okay. I'm trusting you for Katsuki. Make sure Izuku is okay. Okay? Yes, Auntie. Good. I'll inform your parents and Monoma's. I'm sure Shinso's parents will be informed by the school. Most likely. Uraraka lives on her own from what Izuku gathered, so her parents won't be informed until later. You might also want to give Sensei Mike a warning just in case. Alright, I'll contact the others and All Might. Okay. And Katsuki. Yes? It's not your fault. Okay. After that, Inko hung up the phone. Bakugo looked at the screen for a moment before returning to the room. He knows it isn't his fault, but it sure damn feels like it. Mirio waited for Bakugo to come back into the room before pulling his friends outside. He needed to explain what he knew and how they were going to go about this. He barely had a second to talk when Nijire spoke. Who the hell would hurt someone like that? Shoo. Tamiki and Mirio both shush her. Well, I'm sorry, I'm mad, she said, pouting. That kid can't any older than 15. Mirio sighed. I know, but from what Recovery Girl said, it seems like it was his own dash. It is his quirk. However, someone forcefully caused it to activate. Tamaki whispered that someone is a villain and he got away. Both Nijire and Mirio looked at Tamaki. How dash? I paid attention to when the kids were talking. But that's not important. I'm planning on asking to get Fat Gum involved. Wait, seriously? Yeah. Tamaki looked at the door. We might need every possible person available to find him and bring him to justice. Nijire nodded. Then I'll do the same with my mentor. Mirio didn't get to say anything else before Nijire dragged Tamaki back into the room, talking a mile a minute. Mirio sighed. Looks like he would have to send a text to Sir. Bakugo looked at the three upperclassmen as they walked into the room. The blue bitch smiled as she let go of the emo elf. We, as your upperclassmen, are going to help you protect your friend? What? We don't irk. Bakugo bent over from where Uraraka and Minoma had elbowed him in the abdomen. Shinso stepped forward. Alright, I guess we don't have much of a choice since you have been informed, but one wrong move and we let the Pomeranian out on you. I'm not a damn dog, eyebags. The trio nodded as they moved to help set up the futons. The blonde chose to lie down in front of the door while the girl and elf decided to guard the window. Uraraka chose the spot closest to the bed. Minoma was between her and Shinso, who was sitting with his back against the wall. Bakugo took the other side. Are you not gonna sleep? Insomniac. I'll find some sleep later. For now I'm gonna text my dads. They need to know where I'm at. Good night. A chorus of goodnights sounded off as they settled down to sleep. But sleep would not come easy for many. Hizashi looked down at his phone. It had been well over 6 hours since they got to the hospital. Aizawa was still in surgery since Recovery Girl was with Izuku. He was worried. His husband was in surgery, his son was with Izuku, who was suffering the side effects of his quirk. Hizashi leaned back in his chair. He was tired and scared. He had no idea what was going on and what was happening, and he hated it. The light for surgery went off and he jumped out of his seat. The doctor came out. How is he? He's fine, Mr. Yamada. He was very lucky he was not fighting alone, or the damage would have been far greater. Hizashi released a breath he didn't even know he was holding. Thank you. Is there anything more? He did have some damage to the right orbital floor from where his face was smashed into the ground. We removed some bone fragments to keep the damage to his eye minimal. He also had to have skin grafts done on his elbow. His arm had to be set and put into a splint until Recovery Girl gets here. Other than that, he should wake up in the next 45 minutes to an hour. Mike nodded as the doctor gave him the room they were taking Aizawa to. Mai sighed heavily, walking down to the cafeteria. He needed some strong coffee. He got there and was surprised to see Tsukachi there. Neo Mesa, what are you doing here? I was just waiting on you to get your statement of what happened today. Oh yeah, show dash. Aizawa will be asked tomorrow when they bring Izuku in for a checkup. Mike perked up at this. He quickly sat down across from the detective. Was his quirk's reaction that bad? Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, it is a bad reaction by anyone's standards, but he is stable and healthy as far as Recovery Girl said. Besides, some of his friends are staying behind for moral support. Shinso and his protection squad. Correct, also the big three. What? Yeah, apparently they had to help control the other 4 since they were freaking out. And yes, they know what his quirk is. Do you know? Yes, but I can't tell you. Mike slammed his hands onto the table. Why not? He's my student and he's being hospitalized because of it. How the hell am I not allowed to know? Because Nizu asked me not to disclose any information until tomorrow's meeting. Mike gasped at Naomasa. Seriously? I don't like it but Naomasa groaned in frustration and put his head in his hands. The topic is too sensitive to disclose without Izuku's input. Mike sighed sitting down. He knows his reaction was over the top, but he was mad. He's angry that his husband was hurt protecting their students. He's angry that one of his students was hurt by something they can't control. He's angry that his son had to fear over one of his closest friends' life. He's angry because he knows that there is no changing what happened and that tomorrow's meeting is going to be a shit show. He groaned and slammed his head onto the table. Naomasa patted his shoulder as he got up. I'll see you tomorrow. For now head up to Aizawa's room. I didn't respond as Naomasa walked away. He finally got up and walked towards the elevator. He looked around the halls. They were almost empty. Most family and friends either in the rooms or home. He took a deep breath and opened Aizawa's door. Aizawa was sitting up in bed. His arms were crossed, or as crossed as they could with one arm broken. He had a wrap around his face covering his right eye. Hi Shodash. You're late. I'm not late. You're normally beside my bed when I get out of surgery. What happened? Aizawa hated the deadpan voice he had at times. Zashi flinched at his voice. Aizawa shifted to sit up more. Wait, don't move. You just got dashed. You flinched? Zashi stopped just short of touching him to sit him back. Zashi sighed, collapsing into the chair next to his bed. His head was in his hands. Aizawa didn't need to say anything. Zashi would tell him. This has been a shit day. First you're paranoid over Izuku activating his quirk this morning. Then you're off to the USJ. Then villains attack and Izuku's quirk activated. Now, Shinso is with Izuku at UA, you're in the hospital and more people know about Izuku's quirk than people working as his teachers. Aizawa sat up straighter. Maybe they now had a clue. Aizawa made those that know now keep it a secret until tomorrow. God damn it. Zashi quickly grabbed his arm. But he's coming here tomorrow. Aizawa froze. What? Naomasa said he was coming here tomorrow for a checkup. Maybe you could ask his mom or even Izuku himself if you could. No. What? I may want the answer to what Izuku's quirk is, but he's currently hurt. If anything at this moment we have to wait. Why? Aizawa looked at Zashi. He had tears in his eyes. Aizawa took a deep breath to steel himself. Because if we ask him we'd be letting everyone else off the hook? Zashi looked at Aizawa as he glared at the door. Every adult that ever made Izuku hide his quirk will pay. Especially now. Aizawa didn't know why, but he knew. That from that day forward Izuku's problems would only get worse. Mirai watched as All Might told Gran about his choice in a successor. Gran, obviously, was angry but not for what Mirai thought. You idiot! Did you really not think about the consequences of giving someone who has little experience with their own quirk this big of a responsibility? I didn't think he would be attacked by villains his first week of school. All Might rebutted. He was smacked by Gran again. It doesn't matter, you should have trained his original quirk first. Gran calmed down a bit and took his seat on the couch. A plate of taiyaki sat in front of him. So, what's the kid's biohazard quirk called? Mirai sat up in his chair. He had asked All Might what he meant by fetus when they were talking, but he said he had to talk to Nizu and the boy's mom before he could talk to them. Now all they were waiting for was Naomasa to show up. Toshinori seemed to shrink in on himself. It's hard to explain, and I would rather explain it to all of you at once. Then you better start now while the coffee's hot. Naomasa said, walking in with a coffee cup in hand. Toshinori sighed, grabbing his tea and taking a sip. He looked around his living room. Gran was munching away at his taiyaki. Mirai was looking through some paperwork while waiting on him, and Naomasa had pulled out a notebook. He sighed again, looking down at his hands. I will tell you what I know about his quirk, which granted is very little to begin with. But Izuku's original quirk is called Touch Fertility. Toshinori looked up from his hands to see the confusion on their faces. Touch Fertility? Wait, you don't dash. I do. Izuku's quirk is a touch-based quirk that pulls DNA from the person touching him and combines it with his own to create a child between the two. There was a pregnant silence in the room. All three men looked at Toshinori in shock. It was all broken when Gran grabbed his cane and whacked Toshinori over the head hard. He sent Toshinori's forehead colliding with the table. Toshinori looked up, rubbing his forehead. You imbecile. Gran swung again, this time Toshinori dodged. First you don't train with the boy's original quirk. Then you tell me you know next to nothing about his quirk. Now you're saying a 15-year-old is pregnant. Toshinori continued to dodge his teacher as he listened to him. He knew he screwed up. He knew it was bad, but he didn't expect it to get this bad. Okay, enough. Both men turned to Naomasa. This is getting us nowhere. Gran huffed but complied and sat down. He didn't even reach for his food. Toshinori sat back down sighing. He rubbed his face before looking at Naomasa. Is there anything else we should know? Not much. The amount of contact determines how far along the fetus will be. That there can only be one person's DNA involved other than Izuku's. Also that Izuku is unable to give natural birth, so he'd have to schedule a cesarean birth. Naomasa noted this down while Mirai and Gran looked grim. How far along is he now? Dan asked after a few moments. Everyone looked at him. That was unexpected. Toshinori fumbled for a moment before clearing his throat. Apparently around 4 or 5 months if the size was to indicate, but Chio believes it may be further along. She's not been wrong before. Gran added, he is going to a hospital, right? First thing tomorrow morning. His mother and I are taking him in. Which leads me to an uncomfortable part in all of this. Naomasa interjected. We have to have blood drawn so we can scan the DNA records for a match. All 3 men stared at Naomasa. People still use that? Gran and Mirai asked simultaneously. The what? Toshinori asked, so confused. All 3 men present slammed their hands into their faces. Did you learn nothing in school, boy? Gran yelled out in frustration. Yes. Toshinori looked scared. Toshinori, do you recall a law called the DNA confirmatory? Yes, it was a law passed after the first generation of quirks were beginning to have children with quirks. Why is that law so important? Because it's still in effect today. In fact, people use it to find out who their one-night stands are. Mirai said, the fact that you don't know should surprise me, but then again, you never focused on having children. Toshinori blushed. He's right, it's basically a giant DNA database where you can find a match for the child. Gran continued. It will also serve as a way for us to identify the villain. Naomasa finished. I see. Toshinori looked down, but the decision is still in Izuku's hands, right? Naomasa took on a less than happy look. No. What? Toshinori stood up to full height. What do you mean no? Izuku is a victim in a crime with a criminal organization. He also holds the only clue as to who the leader may be. Because of this, I was asked to get the sample as soon as possible, with or without consent. The 3 heroes looked at Naomasa, who looked at his hands. Toshinori sighed, sitting down. He really hated that sometimes, but it made sense. I'll talk to Izuku on the way there. Good, you can also tell him he's gonna have some guests? Gran said. What? Toshinori looked confused as Gran looked at him. We are going to meet with the boy because it clearly shows that you can't use your best judgment. Toshinori was going to rebuttal when Sir interrupted him. I will also be bringing my intern along. If I remembered, you wanted me to use my quirk on the boy. Toshinori looked over at Naomasa, who held up a notebook. I have a case to work on. Toshinori groaned as he leaned back on his couch. This just went from easy to extremely hard. It had been a long night for Mirai. He looked at his cup of coffee. It had long gone cold. He sighed. He looked at the clock. 6 a.m. He knew Mirio would be up by now, so he grabbed his cell. He dialed Mirio's number. It rang twice before he picked up. Sir? Mirio, I need to talk to you about a student. Is it Izuku Midoriya? Mirai stopped pacing. Did Mirio already know? Yes. How did Dash? Yesterday when my friends and I were doing our patrol of the interior of the school, we ran into a student in distress. When he ran off, we followed him. He pulled another student from class and we followed the students to Recovery Girl. There we had to calm the 4 students present and I helped her with Midoriya. Mirai sat down. It was like fate was working with them. For once. He leaned back, rubbing his face. Please tell me he's okay. He's fine, just tired, although, never mind. Mirai sat. Mirio, what's wrong? The line was quiet. Mirai thought something was wrong with Izuku or even the baby. Then Mirio spoke. I was scared. Mirai waited for Mirio to continue. It was so different from what you would expect. You could see his abdomen expand and grow. The baby's limbs would push against his abdomen and push out. His screams of pain, it was terrifying. Recovery girl didn't say it, but she was ready to deliver a baby at that moment. I was scared that she would have to, that he wouldn't have the proper support. I tried, but I didn't feel like I would have been adequate. Mirai could almost see Mirio clutching his chest, bent over with tears in his eyes. Mirai sighed. It was understandable that he was scared. He himself probably would have also been terrified. Mirio. Mirai took a deep breath. You did everything you could in the movement. If anything, we have been lucky. This could have been worse. Now, don't focus on the what-ifs. Focus on the fact that everything went well. That they are both safe and well. Now, when I stop by UA later, you are coming with me so we can meet up with Izuku at the hospital with his mom and Toshinori. Okay? Okay. Mirai smiled softly. Now, try and make sure he eats and drinks something. It takes energy to recover from such quirk incidents. What if he's sleepy? Then let him sleep. Okay, I have to go. The others are looking for me. I'll see you soon. Mirio hummed a response before hanging up. Mirai sighed. This was going to be a long day. Mirio sighed. Looking up, he saw Tamaki. Is he awake? Not yet. But they asked us to go get some food from lunch rush. Mirio looked up to notice Monoma and Bakugo were with them. He also noticed Shinso walk off towards the bathroom, phone in hand. Bakugo scoffed, setting off for the cafeteria. Mirio and Tamaki followed behind them. They got to lunch rush in record time. He was already making some food when he noticed them. You're the students re-dash. Zip it, old man, we have a lift of food for the injured man to eat. Bakugo yelled, slamming his hand down. Mirio and Tamaki looked at each other as Monoma pulled out a list. First we need a pot of raspberry tea dash. I thought we agreed on green. Raspberry is better for a pregnant mother. Green will give him more energy. Mirio stepped up to a very confused lunch rush. We'll take 2 cups of both. Bakugo and Monoma glared at them. Mirio smiled while Tamaki stood behind him. Next we need a light breakfast of yogurt and fruit. It should be egg and rice. Bakugo yelled at Monoma. Raw egg is bad for pregnant women. It gets cooked with the rice's heat. Monoma opened his mouth to rebuttal when Tamaki grabbed both of them with 2 tentacles and grabbed the list. With a glare so fierce, he named off the list. We need 4 cups of tea, 2 bowls of mixed fresh fruits and 2 of vegetables. Also half a pint of milk. We also need some mochi, miso soup and an omelet. Also can an option for yogurt with some fruit and granola. Now for the students that were with Izuku dash. Wait, all that food is for Midoriya? But dash, you will be notified later. Now we need a bowl of rice, coffee, black, spicy curry and an English breakfast. Mirio, Nijire and myself will have our regulars. Tamaki stood still waiting for lunch rush to finish. Bakugo's and Monoma's protest and yells were muffled by Tamaki's tentacles. Once done, lunch rush placed the food on a cart for them. Tamaki walked next to Mirio as he pushed the cart. Wow, I don't think I've ever seen you act so assertive. Tamaki blushed and looked to the side. We're dealing with a very sensitive situation. Time is of the essence, and Recovery Girl said he needed to eat as soon as he woke up. Mirio nodded as they approached the door. When are they going to get here? Izuku blinked his eyes slowly. He felt exhausted. He groaned and turned to his side. Only then did he remember what had happened. He shot up in bed, placing a hand on his stomach. He could feel it. His baby bump. He felt tears well up in his eyes. Izuku! Izuku turned his head to see Achiko. He felt the damn crack. He leaned out with tears streaming down his face. Achiko didn't hesitate and hugged him. He cried loudly into her shoulder. He felt terrible. He knew he wouldn't be able to get rid of his child, but at the same time it hurt to remember how they were convinced. He cried for a good while. He slowly slowed down to some sniffles. He didn't even notice the hand on his back. He looked up to see a pretty girl with long periwinkle hair. Oh, sorry I didn't dash. It's okay. Recovery Girl told us what happened. Izuku felt his heart sink. He knew this would happen, but... And it's okay, we are here to help. Wait, what? What? Both girls looked at Izuku confused. He looked between them. Well, it's just that my quirk is labeled Biohazardes and dash. And? Izuku looked at Achiko. But people dash. are dumb. I'm your friend Izuku. I don't care about your quirk. I care about you. You're my friend. As my friend I care about your safety. Izuku felt tears well up in his eyes. He rubbed them quickly to keep the tears at bay. I'm sorry my emotions seem to be out of control. That's understandable. The three students jumped not knowing that Recovery Girl had come into the room. She smiled at Izuku. How do you feel? Any pain? Dizziness? Izuku thought about it and shook his head. I feel sore. Like if I'd done an extraneous workout. I don't feel nauseous and I don't feel dizzy. Other than my emotions, everything seems fine. Recovery Girl hummed. Good, that means your body healed up well. Izuku nodded, looking down at his stomach. He knew he would have a bump from his child, but to see and feel it was another story completely. He placed a hand on top of his abdomen. Izuku gasped when he felt the sharp kick to his hand. Are you okay? Nijire asked, hovering over him. I just felt him kick, Izuku said in shock. Recovery Girl's eyes widened. What? He kicked my hand? Recovery Girl came over and replaced his hand with her own. Everyone held their breath in anticipation. Sure enough, she felt it. A strong kick to her hand. She hummed. I was right, he is further along. Izuku was going to ask something when his stomach growled loudly. He blushed, looking down at his hands. The girls cooed at him. Oh, don't worry, the guys went to go get you food, Nijire said. When are they going to get here? Achiko yelled, looking at the door. Right here we are. Mirio called out as he pushed the cart in. Tamaki walked in with Bakugo and Minoma behind him. Izuku looked concerned for a moment. Where's Shinso? He went to the bathroom. Achiko answered, but that's not important. What is important is getting some food into you. Izuku looked like he was going to protest when Tamaki placed the whole top of the cart on top of his lap. Izuku's eyes widened. That's a lot of food. Which is good. Recovery Girl interjected, the baby is still rapidly drawing nutrients from your body, so you'll have to eat a lot to compensate until it drops to a more healthy intake. Oh, I see, Izuku said, taking a bite of some fruit. I can also see a good variety, so you all will be fine. Now I have a meeting to attend to and I'll be back then, okay? Okay. They all responded. Recovery Girl nodded. Opening the door, they saw Shinso hanging up his phone. Did I miss something? Izuku snorted before laughing. It seemed like today was going to be a good day. Inko looked up at Yue. She was scared honestly, but she was ready to defend her child. She looked at her hands before walking into the building. She met up with Toshinori there. Good morning. Good morning, Inko. Toshinori said calmly with a soft smile. Did you sleep? Not much. It was hard to. I hear you. But that's for after the meeting. Right now the teachers want answers. Inko straightened up. This was not going to end well, but she will try her hardest. Toshinori placed a hand on her shoulder. It's okay. I'm on your side. They won't do anything without your consent. Inko nodded as Toshinori led her into a conference room. There sat all the teachers, Recovery Girl, a detective and Nizu. 2 seats side by side were empty. Mrs. Midoriya, glad you could make time to meet with us, Naomasa said. Pleasure. Inko replied curtly. Shouldn't we wait for Aizawa and Mike? Vlad asked. Recovery Girl will explain to them when she goes to heal him at the hospital. She is traveling with them to ensure Izuku is well looked after. The teachers nodded at Nizu's response. Now let us discuss the topic of the day. Izuku Midoriya. The teachers all looked at Inko, who took a deep breath. I believe I have to start with his quirk. Correct, Vlad answered. They were all uncertain what his quirk was. Some were even very scared, others worried. Why was Izuku's quirk hidden from them? Izuku's quirk is called touch fertility. This causes anyone who touches him to be at risk, so to say. How does it work? 13 asked. Does it destroy fertility in the person touching them? Snipe contributed. Does it increase their own? Cementos supplied. Oh. It forcibly copies the DNA of the person touching Izuku. It then combines it with his own to create a fetus between the two of them. The silence in the room was painful. Inko held her breath as they processed the information. Midnight was the first to react. Mrs. Midoriya, do you mean that Izuku is currently pregnant? Yes. Izuku has a uterus that allows him to carry any child he has to full term. Midnight covered her mouth. That meant, oh dear God. The teachers all looked sick. None, however, were worse than Hound Dog. He was frozen in shock. He'd let a child know. Inko cleared her throat to get the teacher's attention as many were starting to spiral out of control. If you would allow me, I'll explain why we hid his quirk from you all. Many teachers calmed down, wishing to hear why such a devastating quirk was kept a secret. I will start by saying Izuku has only ever made one other fetus. So, he's a father already? Flattest. No. The child died at 5 months. The teachers all flinched at Inko's cold tone. He was 3. If it had not been for the healing aspect of touch fertility, then Izuku would have died. The fetus tore his entire lower half up. The worst was that after it had been discovered, they did test upon test to figure out if he could control it. After about a year they gave up and told us to request a support item. Then why didn't you? Hound Dog growled. Inko slammed her open palms on the table. You think I didn't? I requested it and got a single stupid letter denying him because it wasn't dangerous enough to want a support item. The teacher all flinched or looked down in shame as Inko spoke. Do you know how hard it was when his father walked out on both of us because he despised his quirk? How I had to stay up almost every night for years to comfort a child who could never enjoy human contact with others? The therapy? The nightmares? The depression? I did everything I could to try and make his life easier. I worked with his schools to try and find a way to keep him safe. I did all of this to try and help him, and now. Inko collapsed into her chair crying. It was so stressful that after 12 years of trying to keep Izuku safe, it was all thrown away in his first week of hero school. Inko saw a hanky appear in her peripheral. Toshinori smiled softly at her as she thanked him for it. He knew how hard it was for both mother and son, how much their life was revolving around them being careful. He sighed, looking up to see very sad and shamed looks on his co-workers' faces. He couldn't blame them too much with how bad quirk discrimination is. He stood up. I believe we should finish this meeting after we take Izuku to the hospital. That way he can be present for when we decide what to do moving forward. Nizu nodded, signaling Recovery Girl and Naomasa to leave with him. He led Inko out of the room. Nizu sighed, knowing this was not going to be an easy battle, especially with what he was going to say in the next meeting. They arrived at the nurse's office to see a stack of empty plates and bowls on the cart outside. Recovery Girl opened the door to see Izuku fast asleep. Shinso was looking out the window with Monoma. Achiko and Nijire were looking at baby nurseries online, cooing about how cute they were. Mirio and Bakugo were having a stare-slash-glaring contest with Tamaki standing next to Izuku's bed. Children? Inko asked, confused. Oh, hi, Mrs. Inko. Izuku fell asleep after he ate and we've just been hanging out. Achiko answered. That's okay. We're just here to take Izuku to the hospital. Bakugo turned to get up when Inko continued. You all will go to Nizu to see what he wants you all to do. And before you yell, Bakugo, 2 things. 1. Izuku is asleep. 2. I am going with Toshinori, Recovery Girl, and this detective. We will be safe. Bakugo grumbled but nodded. Good. Toshi dashed. Inko didn't finish as Toshiner had already picked Izuku up and was walking out the door with Izuku in arms wrapped up in a blanket. Well, he certainly doesn't wait. No, he does not. Naomasa joked, following his friend. Inko looked back and motioned for the teens to pick up before following. They walked down to where Recovery Girl had an ambulance waiting. Inko and Toshinori would ride with Izuku while she rode with Naomasa. And with that, Izuku was finally on his way to the hospital. Izuku felt a hand going through his hair. He hummed, curling up on his side. A deep chuckle caught his attention. He looks so peaceful. Young Midoriya does indeed. Izuku scrunched his face before blinking his eyes. He turned his head slightly and yawned. What time is it? It's only 11. You've been asleep most of the ride, honey. Izuku looked over and noticed his mom sitting next to All Might. Mom? All Might? We're on our way to the hospital, Izuku. Izuku's eyes widened with panic. It's nothing bad, Izuku. We just want to make sure you're both okay. Izuku nodded, calming himself. He looked between them and noticed All Might in his skinny form. Wait, All Might, you're dash. No worries, young Midoriya. She has known since this morning's meeting with the staff. Oh, was it bad? Oh. It was a little short because we have to come with you to the hospital. Not that it's your fault. We also wanted you to wake up so you could help with the decision about what to do going forward. Izuku nodded as the ambulance came to a stop. Glad to see you're awake, buddy. Now let's get you inside and examined by the doctor. Sounds like you had a rough day yesterday. Izuku giggled. You could say that. The man handed him off to the nurses to take Izuku to his room. He looked around curious as to why there weren't that many patients. Where are all the patients? Working. This is a hero's only hospital, you know. One nurse answered. What YM-? You were a severe victim in a villain attack that needs special care. One nurse answered. Also UA is paying to have you at the best hospital possible. Izuku narrowed his eyes and looked over at All Might. Was this your doing? All Might put his hands up in surrender. This was all Nizu and Recovery Girl's doing. I was in no way, shape, or form involved. Izuku hummed as they got him to his room. He was hooked up to N4, had a heart monitor placed on his belly and many other things. He was also given a plate of cookies to munch on while he waited on the doctor. It wasn't long before the doctor walked in. Hello, I'm Dr. Misamoto. Now I was filled in by Recovery Girl about what had happened. Now, we do have one thing I want to get out of the way. What would that be? We need to take a DNA sample from the baby. This is about the DNA confirmatory, correct? All Might and the doctor looked surprised. Yes. How did Dash? He likes to study quirks, so he needs to know certain laws. This one was one we discussed in depth. Inko answered quickly. Oh, yeah, and I can see why we would need to. I would have to know any potential health risks that came with the person's DNA, like disabilities, infant death mortality, STDs they may have had. It's a whole lot of things I have to take into account. Not just for my health but the health of my unborn baby. Izuku informed the group. Toshinori nodded. He was glad he wouldn't have to convince him to do the DNA test, but at the same time he didn't know how much risk went into having a quirk like Izuku's. So, shall we do it now or Dash? Now would be better. Once we have that, we can thoroughly examine you to make sure you're both fine. But, Mom, can you hold my hand? Of course, dear. Toshinori watched as they called in a nurse with a weak X-ray quirk. They quickly took the syringe filled with the needed contents. Toshinori relaxed. He really didn't like seeing Izuku go through this. Now, I'm going to run a few blood work tests to see just how much your body has changed in the last 24 hours, as well as an ultrasound to see the baby itself. Izuku nodded, holding his mom's hand tightly. The doctor closed the door and sighed. You okay, young Midoriya? I'm fine. I'm just worried is all. I mean, it's not every day you have a baby, right? Inko knew Izuku was trying to stay strong. She knew he was worried about his future as a hero. She pulled him into a hug. You have nothing to worry about. I'm here to help you. And I know Mitsuki and Masaru will too. Yeah, I think you might have to add the protection squad as they dub themselves. Oh really? Let me guess. Your friends? Izuku smiled as he went on to explain why they were such a good set of friends while his mom rubbed his back comfortably. A knock at the door broke Izuku out of his trance. Yes? It's Sir and I. May we come in? Izuku recognized the voice as one of his upperclassmen. Oh sure. Come in. The big blonde boy walked in with 3 adults behind him. One was a detective, the other an older man in a hero costume, and lastly Sir. Is there a reason they are all here? Inko asked concerned. Yes ma'am. Sir said Toshinori has some explaining to do. Toshinori looked over at Inko, who narrowed her eyes at him. Izuku looked at him and bowed his head. Toshinori gulped. Toshinori was hiding behind a chair. Inko had been mad after what he'd told her and was glaring at him with her hands on her hips. Sir, Lemillion and Naomasa stood beside Izuku, who just sighed and shook his head. Gran was laughing his ass off at how sacred Toshinori was. Now, if I didn't know my baby as well as I did, I would kill you for hurting my son, but knowing him, he agreed to this without thinking about consequences. Sorry mom/ma'am. Inko sighed, sitting down in her chair next to Izuku's bed. Naomasa could have left by now, having gotten Izuku's statement, but he was curious about the baby's results. So, what do you think the baby will be? Mirio asked innocently. I hope a boy. Izuku replied quickly, I don't think I could handle a baby girl first. Well, I for one want a granddaughter. Inko added, I couldn't have a daughter, so I'll be fine with a granddaughter to spoil. Oh, a girl would be so cute. Miro said, poking Izuku's abdomen. Right, tell us you're a girl. Mirio was smacked on the head by Gran. Boy, don't go poking pregnant people's bellies. Besides, he's hanging low, so it's obviously a boy. Well, since everyone else is making a guess, I'm going girl. Naomesa chuckled, opening his notebook to a clean page. We have 3 votes girl, 2 boy. Surside boy. This is ridiculous. We are with a victim, we shouldn't be making a game out of this. Everyone looked at Tashinori, who was pondering the question. I'd say both are fine so long as they're healthy, but I am a little more partial to a girl. Izuku laughed as the door opened. Well, it's good to see a mother laughing while in a room. The nurse said, rolling in some supplies. I'm going to guess you are all talking about gender, right? Yep. 4 for girl, 3 for boy. Mirio said, moving to the side. Ah, that's so cute. Well, we're going to do the ultrasound now if you would all like to see. We can? Only if the mother allows it. They looked over at Izuku, who was smiling. You let them stay. It's good support, right? That's true. Now I will have you all stand over on the far side of the room so I have space to work. Now Grandma and Grandpa can stand over here. The nurse moved Inko and Tashinori over to one side while Gran, Sir and Mirio were moved to the other side. Tashinori turned pink at the thought of being considered a father to Izuku. He shook it off as the nurse pulled Izuku's shirt up. Now the gel is cold, but it should warm up as we spread it across your abdomen. Izuku nodded as she poured a good amount of gel on her stomach. She moved the wand around trying to locate the baby. Everyone had their eyes glued to the screen when it showed up. It was a tiny little lump, roughly the size of an avocado. There they are. Wow, he's so small. Mirio and Isaac said simultaneously. The adults chuckled as they looked at the screen. They knew Izuku had a baby in him, but to actually see the child was another thing entirely. The nurse looked at the baby a little more before frowning. Inko noticed and became worried. Is everything okay? Everything looks fine. The only thing I see wrong is his size. What? Izuku felt panic creep up his throat. What do you mean? From what I'm seeing, the baby is almost completely formed. I'd say he looks as developed as a 30 to 35-week-old baby. Inko jumped from her seat. That far? The nurse nodded, looking a little concerned. If I remember correctly, that's around 8 months pregnant, but his size doesn't match that. He's currently the same size as a baby, around 16 to 18 weeks old. Could this be a problem? Tashinori asked, getting up to place a hand on Inko. The baby will be fine, right? The baby is healthy. It isn't showing any kind of distress or malformations. The main concern would be if this is natural birth or cesarean birth. Cesarean? I don't have, Izuku mumbled, turning bright pink. I see. That lessens his risks greatly. If anything, I'd suggest being ready to see him in an incubator for the first month of his life. But other than that, the baby should be fine. Inko noticed how Izuku looked worried. She didn't like that look on him, especially with how sensitive his situation was. Did you think we could hear the baby's heartbeat? The nurse looked over and noticed Izuku had gotten nervous. She blushed before nodding. Oh, of course. While we listen to their heart, I can see if I see the baby's gender. She connected a wire to the heart monitor that was on Izuku's belly and turned on the sound. Immediately a loud bumping was heard. Asterisk tanto 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 asterisk. Izuku looked up amazed. That was his baby's heartbeat. He felt tears in his eyes. Oh, I think I have the baby's gender. Izuku snapped his head to the nurse. The heartbeat becomes a nice background noise. Everyone held their breath as the nurse double-checked to confirm her suspicion. It is a baby boy. Izuku smiled. He was having a baby boy. He looked up to see the smiling faces of those in the room. It was such a peaceful moment. Then the door opened. May I come in? It was the doctor that took the baby's DNA for testing. He held multiple folders in hand. I have the results of the baby's paternity if you would all like to hear. Just give me a moment. I'll clean up first, then you can tell them, the nurse said calmly. The doctor nodded as the nurse started to clean up the gel. I'll print you the ultrasound and a copy of his heartbeat for when you leave Han. Izuku nodded as he sat on his bed. This was the moment he would know who the father of his child was. They had been moved into a more spacious room to be given the news. Inko and Tashinori were the two seated closest to Izuku. Naomasa was sitting down at a table with his notebook out ready to jot down all the information needed. Gran, Sir and Mirio sat down on a couch ready to jump in should things go south. The doctor came in and sighed. There is a lot of information to go through, but the first I'd like to say is the child seems to only have his father alive. What? Izuku was confused. Why would there only be one person alive out of all the folders? We were able to find the perfect DNA match to his paternal side, but everyone on that side had been found dead or assumed dead. Inko grabbed Izuku's hand to keep them both grounded. The man grabbed a file, handing it to Naomasa. The father's real name is Tenko Shimura. He was declared dead years ago when his entire family was found disintegrated. He had a sister named Hana, status deceased. His parents were Kotaro and now Shimura, status deceased. He also had a grandmother who was a hero. Her name was Nana Shimura. I could continue further back down the line, but these would have theoretically been the only ones alive today. So I'm sorry, the doctor said, putting all the folders down in front of Naomasa. He excused himself as the air in the room became suffocating. Izuku had turned to his left to see All Might had a look of utter shock. Gran also had one. Izuku looked between them both. All Might? I need a moment. Toshinori got up and raced out of the room asking for a bathroom. Naomasa cursed to himself as he followed Toshinori. Gran also walked out after Toshinori. Sir looked at Inko, who sighed. Izuku, I'm going to make sure Toshinori is okay. Is it something the doctor said? Mostly likely. Now you relax here, I'll be right back. Izuku felt alone as his mom left to make sure his mentor was okay. He wrung his hands together as Sir stood walking up to him. Mirio, go get us some tea from the cafeteria? Yes, sir. I'll be right back, Izuku. Don't worry. Sir waited for Mirio to leave before addressing Izuku. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I was not at all happy with All Might choosing you as his successor. Izuku flinched at Sir's words. However, I've come to realize that that choice isn't mine to make. For that reason I agreed to help him with a small favor. Which is, All Might wanted me to see into your future to make sure you were okay. Both of you were okay? Izuku snapped his head up to Sir. Really? Yes. He cares about you. Much so that after 6 years of no contact, he called me to see if there was any way we could help you. I see. Izuku thought about it for a moment. I would like to, but my Quirk. The choice is yours alone. I will accept any consequences that come from our interaction. But then let's do it. I want to make sure we're both okay. If I'm not, then maybe I'll pass on OFA to someone who can. Sir did answer as he took Izuku's hand and looked into his eyes. What he saw scared him. Toshinori dry heaved into the bowl. He couldn't believe it. His master's grandson, he legacy. Toshinori felt his stomach clench again. Toshinori, are you okay? Toshinori cursed himself. Inko was right outside the stall door. He flushed the toilet, opening the door. Inko looked up at him with worry-filled eyes. Behind her, Naomasa was talking with Gran. I'm sorry. Inko hugged him. He frozen at the Sidden contact. He looked down as she hugged him tighter. You look like you're about to fall apart. So I'm going to go hold you together. Toshinori felt tears return his eyes. He leaned down and hugged Inko. He let himself sob silently as she soothed him. He didn't even notice they had been sitting on the floor for a while. He cleared his throat as he composed himself. Sorry, I should dash. Now enough apologize. I know whatever it is, you had a reason to leave the room. Izuku would understand now. I'm going to head back and see if he's okay. Okay? Toshinori nodded, not trusting his voice. He sat there watching her leave the men's restroom. Gran stood on one wall while Naomasa stood on the other. What do we do? Gran asked Nana's grandson. A villain? Toshinori looked at his hands. He failed Nana by letting her son and his family die. Now Tenko was a villain that has fathered a child with Izuku, the baby. We help Izuku. Toshinori? Naomasa was confused as All Might stood at full height. He looked determined. Something he'd only seen a handful of times with villains. Izuku now holds the last known Shimura. We can make it up to Nana by finding Tenko and helping Izuku with the baby. Gran didn't say anything but nodded. If Toshinori's successor was anything like him, then he wouldn't have to worry about them. The men all smiled as they walked back towards Izuku's room. The door there were multiple doctors and nurses being removed from the room. Toshinori's heart got caught in his throat. They raced into the room to see Izuku smiling and crying. What happened? I can touch people? Toshinori looked at the door to see Recovery Girl standing there. Chio, did you dash? Aizawa and Yamada are riding back with us and they are not happy. And now he's dead.